OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
A few minutes after it.
A few minutes after that, very good. That's good stuff, Colin. We're very welcome along to OTB AM. This is live Friday morning, and Colin's just extending the production meeting into the show. But good morning to you, wherever it is you're at. Colin, better go to you first. How are you getting on?
Adrian, you what? You understand that now?
All over. Shane.
Good morning, Adrian and Colin. I think that was just a show, just to show that he's, to the audience, that he's doing loads of work behind the scenes. Working really hard.
Oh yeah, I mean, even just to fully lift the veil, he was like standing up.
We're live, are we? We're live.
For Emma had to come in and say, "Listen, do you mind sitting down?" It's like, I know, I'm so important to the whole operation here. Anyway, the two of you are getting ready to hit the high road down to Kilkenny later on for the radio awards.
Yeah.
I know it's not a medium that we recognise in this platform, but the radio awards are on tonight, and you're both going down to large it up.
Yeah.
You're going down because your involvement in
OTB Live is my baby. The
weekend show,
sports show of the year, the weekend show, of course, Saturday and Sunday. So
very good.
Yeah, and strong candidacy this year.
You're going down because
I don't know why I'm invited. I have no idea.
Yeah.
I just got an invite. I got an email there, and I was like, "Is this the right person?"
Yeah.
But I checked it, and it was. But I'm just going down just to watch what could have been, because OTB AM don't qualify for these awards, which is absolutely insane.
Yeah,
for digital, as you all know.
Oh, but it's got. I mean,
if there were digital IMROs, great. Like, I'd be very excited. But I'm just there to watch.
Not an invite for everybody, Shane, as you're aware.
No,
it's obviously a big
exclusive.
business and it's a small event. And I got invited. Yeah.
Why aren't you going?
I just felt that like there was people more deserving of a change, to be honest with you, than me. I didn't want to be going out and taking up a seat and
What was your excuse the other many years you did go? Was there?
Well, the year I won the Sports Broadcaster of the Year.
Sorry, you had to be there that year.
Yeah.
That's important.
2013.
Was it?
2013, yeah.
Yeah, coming up with the 10-year anniversary.
10-year anniversary.
We should do something on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was the year of surprise winners. Clare won the hurling that year as well. So
yeah, the underdogs came through.
The underdogs came through.
Yeah, who was the Cork that you lost to?
Huh?
Who was the Cork that lost to you in 2013?
Joe Malloy.
Oh, there was a series of. There was the usual people that get shortlisted for these things.
Yeah.
Was it your finest moment?
Well, it beat the silver I'd picked up a couple of years previously.
Yeah.
It's good that you went from silver to gold.
Oh, I'm just saying that I know what Shane's saying, but like I was beaten in the final previously. So
well, yeah.
There's no speech though. Like it's you just walk
you just get up, is it?
Oh, exactly.
Get the hell out of Dodge.
Yeah. Jeez, it's a long enough evening without all that. But anyway, Shane, like you were saying, you're working tomorrow, so you're going to be taking nice and handy tonight.
Yeah.
So fair play. That's great.
Famous last words, but
That's what he said. That's what Shane said. This is the reason the production meeting ran over there towards the end, with Shane was that I'm going to take it handy tonight. And
yeah.
You're no more going to take it handy. Like, if this is a film, the next scene will be you in the bar. Wild. That's how you from the head.
This is my first drink. This is my last drink.
Exactly.
Try the trend tonight.
You should do one of those later on.
Should actually, yeah.
With everybody you can meet.
For the TikTok channel.
Ian Dempsey, this is my first drink.
Yeah.
Pat Quinny.
We should do a Team OTB one and see who shames themselves the most, perhaps.
I'd have candidates, all right.
Who can you get? Try and get somebody who's not employed by Off the Ball. I mean, I don't mind, even if it's like a Bauer personality, somebody like that, high profile personality, not for Off the Ball, to do the here's my first drink, here's my last drink.
Yeah.
Is that fair enough?
I think that's a fair shout.
You all right over
Pat
there?
Kenny's going to be there.
We've lost colour.
Bigger cups than usual. It's quite nice.
Producer's mind in the corner over there.
We should do that. That would be good. That would be good, actually. Shane, have you been to the IMROs before?
I think I've been twice. This is my third IMROs. I think it's twice so far. Both times in the Lyrith in Kilkenny. It's always a good night's crack.
Yeah.
I've actually, this is my second time coming in the next day afterwards, and it's not the worst. Usually it's not too bad, because I remember coming in once and myself and Nathan were both in, and he had been there the night before, so you kind of revel in each other's hangover.
He'd both been as unprofessional as each other.
Exactly, but tomorrow John Duggan's being ultra professional, and he's not going tonight, so it'll be just me in my lonely little isolated mental state tomorrow with John. So it'll be grand. And
before we start getting the listen, it's a sports show, what are you on about, which is inevitable at some point or another. The United match obviously last night, we just to flag up, we're going to be we've busy show for you this morning, and Ronan O'Gara is going to be joining us in about 5 or 6 minutes time, and we'll chat to him about loads of stuff, because we haven't been talking to him in 3 or 4 weeks, so plenty of stuff to talk about with him, and we'll get to that at 20 to 8 this morning. Martin Lipton is going to talk Arsenal primarily off the back of last night, and another comprehensive win, and a win that you just start to expect expect from this Arsenal team now, and we'll touch on Tottenham, of course, there as well. Sports pages free, including reaction to the confirmation that Scotland will be the hosts and the opposition for Ireland next Tuesday in the World Cup playoff at Hampden Park. So we'll be talking to Kathleen about that a little bit later in the show. Shane is going to chat to Lee McKenzie off the back of her new book, Formula 1 book, that is at 10 to 9 this morning. Alan Quinlan after that will preview the weekend's URC action as well. Interesting stuff, particularly the heat is on obviously for a couple of provinces particularly, and we'll let you know what's happening across the back pages in the middle of all of that as well, so plenty to come on that. But we do need to talk about the Man United game to kick things off. 3-2 win at Menia last night. Harry Malacia was the only thought I could have on the back. It was the opening goal. It was like a carbon copy of what Maguire had done last weekend.
Sancho didn't cover himself in glory for the goal either, but Malacia just kick it out of play or pass it quickly, get rid of it. It was a laughing stock, the first goal, and half time at 1-0 down you're thinking this is a team fourth in the Cypriot League. These are world beaters, and you're seeing Neil Lennon on the touchline, obviously delighted at half time. The performance wasn't good, but then for once, and Daniel Harris made this point on Twitter last night, the thing about Ten Hag is there are consequences now for your bad performances. He kind of didn't get that vibe under Solskjaer or Rangnick. He was sticking with the same kind of personnel. All of a sudden Ten Hag drops people, brings them back in. Martial, Shaw and Rashford were brilliant off the bench, and they were the difference. United probably wouldn't have won the game only for Rashford, especially in Martial playing the way they did when they were sprung from the bench.
The Rashford goal was like just insane quality, and he obviously has the ability to do that every now and then. United have the ability to do that every now and then in a way that makes you think, geez, if they could like tie that together. I know it's the greatest hypothetical of all time. If they could just play like that more, they'd be better, but they'd have it in them. It's
too intermittent, isn't it? And I know Colm, you had some thoughts on Cristiano Ronaldo.
Definitely Ronaldo at the end was ridiculous, but even the Rashford goal, the first one, Fernandez's ball over the top is great, but Rashford actually made a mess of it because he cut back in and the defender got a leg to it. So if the defender had a bit more composure, he would have retained possession and the attack would have ended, and it would have been a spurn chance by Rashford. But his quality is such that if you literally give him a second chance, he will finish. It was great. It was a great finish, and he needs that. Martial has been brilliant since he came back. Like, there's 2 games in a row now he's been excellent. That finish was fantastic, and we were talking in the group like at half time, the 3 of us were saying, geez, we might have to go all in on United here tomorrow, but I had a feeling that they'd come back. But then, right at the end, then when the second goal, I was like, this could end 3-all.
I was concerned, yeah.
But what really got me was Cristiano Ronaldo at the end and the treatment of him by his teammates. So, was it his testimonial? Like, it was insane. Like, Rashford was through 1-on-1, and it was genuinely a better angle for him to try and finish it.
For a hat-trick as well.
For a hat-trick, and he squares it to Ronaldo because they're seemingly also desperate for Ronaldo to score, so he'll be happy around the place. And the pass was poor, but Ronaldo stopped dead. Didn't slide like we're seeing Erling Haaland do for a lot of his goals at the moment, and it must absolutely kill Ronaldo, first of all, that he didn't score, and secondly that you have someone like Haaland who's coming around, who's breaking all records and making even him seem human in his heyday at the moment. And then like for the final goal for Rashford's second and United's third, I mean that was 100% a shot by Ronaldo which went across the box and Rashford tapped in, and you could see Ronaldo's body language. It's like, oh.
Yeah, then he started.
When it went in and they went 3-1 up, he was like, and he stood where he was perfectly still, and Rashford had to go to him, even though Rashford scored.
To be fair, to Ronaldo, he did make the interception further up the pitch that led to that.
Ronaldo played well.
He did make an interception, I think, in the lead into. He set up. He obviously set that goal up. He made a brilliant run for Rashford's first goal. He obviously had that thing where he hits the post and then he's like.
But if you were to watch football for the first time last night and hear all about Cristiano Ronaldo and then see him play, you'd be like, Jesus, he's a fairly flawed player. Like, because they gave him the ball at one stage, I think it was either Rashford or Martial. It was a crisp pass into the box on the left-hand side of the box, and if he just took a touch and hit with his left, it was probably going to be a goal. But he tried to cut back in and was very easily dispossessed. There was another chance then when Rashford on the left flank brilliantly skinned the fullback. It was like his turn of pace is exceptional. And a bit of composure, stopped, played the ball inside to Ronaldo, who had it in the centre of the pitch about 35 yards out. If he had looked up, he would have seen an overlap on his right, but he drove down the left. Now he caught in and took a shot with his right foot and it just went wide. But I mean, that encapsulates the exact problem with Ronaldo, is that, like, I thought he played quite well at moments, I thought he was very poor at other moments, but the problem is the impact that he has on those around him, particularly in the final third. His presence is so strong that they feel like they have to alter their game to accommodate him.
For the game where Ten Hag said, I didn't want to bring on Ronaldo because it was just disrespect to his career, that he brought on Martial instead. Who did he bring
Yeah,
on?
against City, yeah.
What, like, I didn't hear anybody talking about what a disrespect it was to say that after the game
To Martial, yeah.
Because Martial is expendable by his reputation.
Oh.
He spent second half of last season on loan to Sevilla. It's like, it doesn't matter what we do to
You just need
Martial.
excuses, Ten Hag, in order for not bringing Ronaldo onto the pitch. Ronaldo did look exasperated, like the hands in the air every time he missed a chance, and he was like, why aren't these shots going in? Well, he did play well though overall.
I thought he made a huge impact in the game. But I thought he was very inconsistent with his play overall. But there was another moment as well where Dalot rounded the goalkeeper.
Yeah.
It was actually very good play by Dalot because he composed himself and passed it into him. But it was sure because it was Ronaldo in the middle. I got to pass this to him. And
Came at him quite fast though. I thought. Maybe
and again he did well with his instincts. But I'm just saying, like, we talk about the great Cristiano Ronaldo. But like, we should talk about some of his shortcomings. Like, he's an amazing goal scorer, and never has a player changed more in the history of football from a tricky winger who had all the skills in the world, but whose final product was questioned to the exact opposite now. But I think a lot of his game he's quite short on compared to his peers, and I think you could see that last night. But it's more for me the impact that he has on his fellow forwards, and that's actually the reason why I think Ten Hag is right to leave him out as much as possible and move on.
Well, look, we'll let you. Speaking of moving on, we'll let you two flog yourselves about United a bit later in the show, because there's plenty of self-inspection to be done there over the next while. 20-8. Ronan O'Gara, good morning to you.
Adrian, Colin, how's it going?
How are you getting on? Are you in at the training ground, or where are you?
I am just did the school drop off.
An eventful
little
spin.
fill up of Greenville, and here now, waiting for a cup of coffee, but I do my off the ball first.
I would suggest coffee first.
Jesus,
and then
Ronan, get the coffee in first.
What's the are you 2 weeks into the touchline ban?
Yeah, more maybe.
More.
Can you hear me?
I can. Yeah. Have you there? How are you coping with it? Is it?
Yeah, it's frustrating, but it's essentially all of my own doing, So if you do the crime, you got to do the time. So hopefully it'll resonate with me this time, and when I'm put in that situation the next time, I react better, react differently, or maybe I don't put myself in that position the next time. But it's incredibly difficult because you're not allowed to engage at half time. Half time is very, very important in any sport, I would think. But it can be over appreciated too, in the fact that whether it's my message, an assistant coach's message, our message, that's the key point, But it's just so much easier not having to pass a bit of paper or do a quick WhatsApp to Skin Ryan or one of my French colleagues to pass the message. But I was that player as well. I think it's interesting. We as coaches think that we can change an awful lot of things, but once you've kind of started off in the battle at half time, you'd want to be looking at maybe one key change or reinforce what we have been doing.
Are you considering staying in the stand then? Or are you thinking, because you always try and, one always tries to convince themselves that they'll be better the next time?
Yeah, but I suppose it's not the first or second time either. We're up over 5 or 6 times that this has happened, so I have to get better at it, But I think it's interesting for people that aren't too au fait with top 14 rugby. There's a little bit of the banished door on the sideline about it, and if I'm seen to be seen in the stand all the time, maybe, why isn't he more connected with his team? But that's you being influenced and, I suppose, open to outside opinion, which is essentially a weakness, really, if you believe in your own plan. But sometimes there are games where you just kind of may feel you can get something out of your players at pitch level. However, I feel that this is all done Monday to Friday, and Saturday should be a case of implementing our plan.
We've seen the clips of Jose Mourinho sitting in the Roma team bus when he's been suspended, kind of watching the matches outside the stadium on the television. Ronan, might seem like a ridiculous thing to say, but are there any advantages to getting to watch your team or your club from a totally different vantage point
But that's the kind of, I suppose, that's the big enigma. It isn't any really different in the fact that you're allowed to attend the game, you're allowed in the ground, you're allowed on the pitch before the warm-up. However, I'm not allowed, we'll say, referee a warm-up drill or engage in a warm-up drill, so you have to remove yourself from that. But that's not a big issue, really, to be honest. You can get one of your coaches to do that. That's whether it's me, and they do a lot of the drills in game day anyway. So you're watching the game kind of 3 up from where you would normally be. You're outside the box, but you're not in the box. So there's a load of different rules, but I suppose the big one is not being allowed into the change room at half time. So it's, at my stage of my career, it's pretty easy for me to manage, but it's, it's the exact same thing when you're giving feedback to players. It's not what you tell them, it's what they've heard. And when you're not there, it's maybe creating a void in their lives where if you behave better, that void wouldn't be there. So it's on you, and I have to own that and get a little bit better at that. But I suppose in the bigger pictures of things, we can get over this.
As you said, you did get a chance to be on the pitch beforehand. There was a nice picture of yourself and Lauren Travers shooting the breeze beforehand. The word Stuart Lancaster come up?
No, I wouldn't. I just think they were away to Toulouse the week previously. They got a drubbing down there, so I knew that they'd come here looking to get something, and they were for an hour the better team. So he'll feel aggrieved. Obviously, we chatted before the game. No, his sister had passed away, and I would have been very friendly with him because he would have been in the staff, and then the relationship went sour because there was not sour, but the relationship at the club would have gone sour because I was seen as the bad guy pinching their players. But from my point of view, 22 of their players were out of contract. Players want to talk. I wanted to talk. There was business to be done. So it was more a case of putting that to one side and I suppose emphasising the more important things in life, that his sister had passed away and I hadn't seen him. I wasn't at the funeral, and it was important for me just to say that to him. And I had a good few years in Paris with him, went through everything. We won a bouclier, so once you win something with someone, the bond is there for life. So that's there. It's a little bit tarnished, but that happens in top level sport, but the respect remains the same.
Yeah, and you're doing your best for your team, you're doing your team as well, and something like that obviously puts everything into perspective. We haven't been talking to you since Stuart Lancaster was appointed. What can he expect in terms of, culture shock might be overstating it, but what will be the main differences for him coming from the Irish system into that French setup?
Well, I haven't coached in Ireland, Adrian, so from that point of view, I don't know, because I don't know how a coaching week looks like. From a club's point of view, it'll be different, but the biggest thing would be the language. I think you can talk about culture and environment, but one of the basic necessities or requirements is the capacity to communicate. And that's not a one-way street, that's a two-way street. So when you're speaking to someone or a group, you need to be able to understand them and they need to be understand you. And sometimes you don't need actually French for that. You just need sometimes communicate with your eyes. Sometimes it's non-verbal, and sometimes you need to speak. So that's very important in France. And obviously they're very selective on who they, I suppose, not let in, but I understand that I'm an outsider in the top 14, and the fact that I'm from Ireland coaching there, and they have an awful lot of good coaches in France, but I'm taking up one of the top jobs. So with that comes a responsibility to produce for La Rochelle, which I think I'm doing okay or well at. So from Stuart's point of view, he'll be going in there, but he's more experienced than I am in the coaching game, and he'll know exactly what he needs to do, because essentially we speak rugby. We speak English, we speak French, but we speak rugby. It's just about getting that message across, and there's a lot of good boys in racing. I think he's going to a very good club. I think he's going to an established club. I think 2013 when I joined, it's a very different racing 10 years later than it is now, and an incredibly good city. So he'll have, I think, a great opportunity to experience a top European club, but also, it's important he gets to see Paris as well.
Yeah, it'll be a big adventure over the next while. I was trying to think what the Dublin equivalent of an Ile de Ré would be, Ronan, and I can't think. Like, is it a Sandymount or a Howth or somewhere that might suit you nicely?
Yeah.
Dalkey, you've mentioned before.
I let you talk about maybe Dalkey or Howth. I think there's only mansions in those places, isn't there? Ile de Ré and normal houses. We'd be offending a lot of people with our suggestions unless we were accurate, so I'll pass.
Obviously, the underlying question that has come up, and like it's not an equivalent role to the level that you're at, but Leinster?
Going into Leinster?
Yeah.
Of course, it's a fantastic club. It's a brilliant setup, but the reality is, Adrian, the way their club is set up and who I am, I think they have loads of alternatives to look at. But Leo's a competitor, Leo's a winner. The club are interested in success. I'm a competitor. I think it's a good fit, but as you say, where I am now, I would like to think is on a par with what Leinster do. That's certainly the way I see it. Maybe a lot of people in Ireland would disagree with me, but that's the vision I have for Stade Chalet, that it's a European club that has competed consistently in the last 2 years. Yes, we don't have history like anything like any of the Irish provinces, but it's about looking forward and seeing what we can do over the next few years. And I think it probably suits my mindset better by driving this club on.
I think it's an interesting one. Like, I know your blood runs red, Ronan, obviously, but it's something that came up in football with Rafa Benitez kind of taking the Everton job, and in hindsight deciding it maybe wasn't a good thing with his Liverpool links. Like, hypothetically speaking, is it an issue where you see in Irish provinces that it might not be the easiest thing for Munster people to coach Leinster, and even vice versa as well?
Potentially, but I suppose I left in 2013. I'll be on the road 10 years, and the difference between Benitez and I is I grew up in Cork. I know everything about him. I love Cork. Benitez is a Spaniard that moved to Liverpool, and obviously it's very different culturally for him. There would be a huge attachment for Munster from my playing days, but I think as people move along, they see the world a little bit differently, and that was my playing days. Now I'm a professional coach, so as you say, you want to give yourself the best chance of winning, or to give yourself the best chance of competing. Leinster are a great club. Munster were a great club, but they're not anymore. They have work to do to get back where they want to be, and that's of huge interest to me as well, because it's a club I love. I can't say the same about Leinster. I don't love Leinster because I never played for them. I don't have anything to do with Leinster, but I recognise also that they have great values and a very good environment. And the reality is that I'm engaged here for the foreseeable future. So, the issue of moving to a club in Ireland isn't on the radar.
So you're saying there's a chance? Is that...
No, it isn't. But I just think, for respect, I think people need to understand that you move on. Your mindset as a player is very different to a 45-year-old, and but I think it's also important to say that I'm from Cork.
That's fair enough. The one of the potential replacements, I'm sorry, it hasn't been really sort of mooted at all, other than wild speculation, probably come from this studio as much as anywhere else. Like Johnny Sexton is obviously out of contract at the end of the year when the World Cup is over, and I know he's on the record as saying that coaching is not really going to be his thing, and maybe ultimately that's the only answer to this question. But from what you know of him, which is a fair bit, is he somebody who would be naturally suited to that direction?
Yeah, I think most definitely. I know he has an eye on going into business. I think he's obviously doing that role with Ardagh Glass at the minute, and that's a good coup out of them to get someone like him. But Johnny has a great brain, and he has a great way of looking at the game. I for certain think he'll go coaching. But Johnny be smart enough to understand that there's a few cogs involved in getting the best out of himself as a coach. To go in as the boss man in Leinster wouldn't be for me the right move at this stage. But in terms of a backs coach, he'd be absolutely brilliant, and I think he's very suited to it. And I think he has great ideas in the game, and so I hope the game doesn't lose him, to be honest. But the appointment, they've appointed Andrew Goodman, who played for Leinster, who coached Tasman as a head coach, who coached the Crusaders. This guy's a gem. He could be a very natural, a natural successor to Stuart Lancaster in that role, with Leo's strengths in terms of managing the bigger picture. Andrew Goodman has experience of head coaching with Leinster, with Tasman, had a huge role with the Crusaders and their success, and they may already have an eye on who they want, and he's already in the building.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Like when you bring up Andrew Goodman, Ronan, like he had some lovely words to say about you. I think a couple of weeks ago as well, he was saying you had an amazing perspective in the game, and kind of referencing your time with the Crusaders as well. For you with Andrew, like I think it was Jordan Larmour maybe speaking this week about the impact Andrew has had since he's come in at Leinster, and he said for one thing that the player meetings and coach meetings have been a little bit shorter and more matter of fact and to the point. But he also involves the players in the process as well, and when the style of play issue comes up, the players are very much involved. So that's obviously something that Andrew brings to the table as well.
Yeah, he is. He's I think what I really like about him is just his mood. Whether it's 6 o'clock in the morning or he's after a long day, 20 to 6, 12 hours later, you always get the goods from Goody, excuse the pun. And that's very important, I think, in our business, as opposed to a guy you get the impression he doesn't really want to engage with me on this conversation. He's keen to get out. He loves it. He could be doing skills sessions, joining in the skills sessions, or else he could be the guy leading a very technical discussion in terms of how to break down a backline from this set piece. So I think he has a lot of strings to his bow, and I think the key one obviously is dealing with people, because that's essentially what we do. A lot of our time is obviously looking at strategy, but so much of our time, and the most important bits of our time, is how we develop relationship with our players. That's absolutely crucial, and he's very, very good at that.
That is quite the recommendation. Just before we let you away, Joey Carberry, Freudian slip there, Joey Carberry named at 15 for Munster for the Connacht game in the URC this weekend. What's your... Are we reading too much into this to even have a conversation about it? Mike Haley's injured, so he's filling the gap, and that's it. Move on, nothing to see.
Yeah, I think so. And I think Simon Zebo, is Simon Zebo injured as well?
He doesn't feature anyway, so he must be, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I was talking to Mike not a few days ago, it's probably over a week now, but he was saying that they've been unfortunate with a lot of injuries, and obviously they have guys on the tour, so he said they were really, I suppose, tapping deep into their resources. So for me, as a coach, you want your best players on the pitch, whether it's at 10 or 15. For me, Joey Carberry needs to be on the pitch, so ideally, from Ireland's point of view, he's playing at 10, but you have to put Munster's needs first this weekend, and he's playing, and that's good for Munster, and it's good for him.
Very good. What is it? Is it a cappuccino or an Americano, or what gets the day going?
Cafe Merling, our big president. It's
what is it?
Cafe Merling. Vincent Merling is our president.
Okay.
You know?
So you're obliged to. You can't be having anything else.
Exactly.
Good man. Go on.
See you, lads.
Thanks a million.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers. That was good stuff. Interesting stuff across the board. Leinster not really an option. I don't think he's also living in. I mean, I think you were asking the pertinent question, which we've had. It struck me that we've had that conversation with him before about England.
Yeah,
I think he was more inclined. I think he was more inclined to take the England job,
Probably,
than Leinster.
Yeah, well, would you take the? Who are the main Westmeath rivals? Lee, Shoffley, Meath, Dublin. Sorry, well, you like to think so.
This, like I heard you having a conversation during the week about Kildare and
Kildare, yeah.
Like this, you assumed in the conversation that Kildare was the second best team in Leinster, which is an awful arrogance.
Are they not?
Okay. I mean,
well, I know Westmeath.
I know they beat Westmeath only by 3 points. Let's face it, it was more than that in the semi-final last year. It's not like Dublin, Kildare.
No, I think
and then the rest.
Yeah.
It's like Dublin,
Kildare, Westmeath. No, I agree.
Westmeath, like there's the fine margins. I'm just saying.
God, you were triggered by that anyway, Adrian.
I was triggered.
Yeah.
What was your question? Would I take over Dublin?
Well, it's a similar thing. The Munster Leinster, you know, I guess when people have a rivalry they grew up with, it's something that you can't really let go of. And Ronan is, as he said, it's not really like a Benitez thing. He is a Cork man. He is a Munster man to the bone. So it would be difficult from that perspective to take. Like, you can't imagine Ronan O'Gara sitting in a Leinster dugout playing against Munster.
I can.
Can you?
Yeah, I think that his answer was more to do with just there's work to be done in La Rochelle. That was, I mean, he well able to represent himself and he did that just fine. Yeah. But that was my takeaway from it. That it wasn't. He certainly wasn't saying. Obviously, he was saying, you know, his base is Cork, and that's his more natural leaning. That's the most obvious thing in the world. But I wonder, would he? And you know, I'm from Cork. Come very excited. I've never seen him so excited.
How do you know someone from Cork? They'll tell you.
Short tenure so far in the box out there. So there is that. But I don't know. He wasn't fully shutting the door on a. Like he's a rugby coach.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and that's why he's going to be linked inevitably with these jobs. But
he's a top rugby coach.
Yeah.
Leinster are a top rugby team. It'd be madness to say that would never happen.
Would it not be more of a challenge to take your old province back to the heights they once were in 06 and 08?
More of a challenge. Yeah.
It's a challenge, yeah. But yeah, it'd be obviously it's not maybe not going to happen. And he gave Andrew Goodman a fair decent recommendation there for the role. Yeah. So that's a LinkedIn thumbs up from Ronan for that job, I think. So
a LinkedIn thumbs up, that's the modern parlance.
I don't know what way it's. Kudos? No, I don't know how LinkedIn works. Yeah. But yeah, no. Goodman is obviously Goodman's a man that Ronan knows very well, and as I said, Andrew Goodman spoke very highly about him recently. So, but it's Johnny Sexton's role at some point.
Well, I did think that was interesting. He was the first person of that calibre, that because like Sexton's on the record himself now, not that recently as far as I can recall, saying they didn't really want to get into coaching. The business thing was his thing. Yeah. And that seems still as if maybe that's the way he's going. He's certainly very invested in his business interests. So, as you would expect, whether, you know, like I think Ronan makes a very fair point there that, like, you know, maybe going straight into what effectively is kind of a head coach job with a director of rugby, obviously in Leo Cullen beside you, you know, whether that's the smartest thing as your first gig.
Yeah.
I think he might have gone as kicking coach to Racing before he moved into other areas. Yeah,
you have to earn your stripes a little bit. And good. That's what Goodman has asked a couple of weeks ago about Ronan maybe going back to Super Rugby and being a head coach with someone like the Crusaders or someone. But I mean, that's up in sticks and heading back halfway across the world to manage a team. So I don't know if that's on Ronan's radar. But I think you do have to earn your stripes. So for Johnny, it's probably a case of slowly emerge your way into coaching and develop your talents. You probably maybe have to go elsewhere, leave Leinster in order to come back. So
where would he go, Shane? Come on,
well, that's insult
to province.
Not Munster.
Insult to province.
Yeah, probably not Munster because of the aforementioned rivalry. But Johnny has a great future in coaching, I think, if he wants it.
Who's your team?
My rugby team.
Monaghan man.
We had this discussion. I knew this was going to come up. I'd probably follow Connacht Rugby,
right,
more so than Ulster Rugby. No real, like Tommy Bowe gave us some great days in the Ulster jersey and watched him.
Would you gone up watching him?
No.
When he was there? No,
I'd have.
You ever been to Ravenhill?
Never been to Ravenhill.
Wow.
Never been to Ravenhill. I just I don't know. It's I never followed the Ulster team as such. Whereas I would follow I'd nearly followed the other 3 Irish provinces ahead of Ulster when it comes to rugby. I know it sounds a strange thing to say, but there's probably a lot of disenfranchised rugby fans in Monaghan, Cavan, Donegal especially, that maybe don't feel like the Ulster rugby team is something that they get involved in.
And maybe within the 6 counties.
Yeah, probably. It's maybe it's a cultural thing, and maybe it's just over the years that's just been the way it's been. Probably shouldn't be, because anyone who knows the geography knows Monaghan, Cavan and Donegal are in Ulster. But yeah, it's a funny one, because I know
that you don't feel part of the province, or like you don't feel part of the Ulster rugby brand,
because you're in but you're out. You're kind of, you're on the borderline there.
And come here, forgetting about all the like political, reasons, etc., that you might not want to do that. I went up to a game there, Connacht game, a couple of years ago. It was like, it's a great night out. We never tempted to just go, Jesus, like good quality and show tonight. Even to go up and support your native Connacht and all that, or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, to go to Connacht?
Yeah, to go up to Ravenhill and just check out a game.
Maybe, you see, I don't know, obviously the Connacht link for me is Dad is a Galway man.
You have a get out clause, is what you're saying.
That's my get out clause. So I have a bloodline straight into Connacht. But yeah, I don't know. And people have said that the atmosphere at Connacht matches and the night out in Galway afterwards is well worth it. Now, Belfast is a great town for a night out as well. But I feel like the atmosphere at the Connacht games just is a bit, like tonight, for example, is going to be an excellent night out for both sets of fans. And they've got the new 4G pitch as well. Yeah. Like that's a proper atmosphere, and Galway's going to be hopping after the match because of it. So I don't know. There's just something about Connacht that maybe drew me there more than Ulster. There are plenty, don't get me wrong, of Monaghan rugby fans who are Ulster fans also. Right. But I know there's a large cohort. I don't know the percentage split, but a large cohort who won't go to Ulster and will maybe follow other provinces. Yeah. So it's a funny one. I don't know the reasons for it.
Definitely want to hear from you this morning. If you're in any of those counties and you have a view on that, fire it into us and explain it to us, and we'll bring it to the audience this morning. You are watching OTB AM. It's gone 8:05. It is Friday morning, and you're watching OTB AM, brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs, for an effortless finish to your day. And wherever it is that you are at this morning, we're delighted to have you with us, whether you're on your commute or just taking it handy on a Friday or preparing to go on the lash, like our colleagues here a little bit later on, wherever it is, we are delighted to have you with us, and we've loads still to come. We're going to talk to Alan Quinlan, get in our teeth stuck into the URC a little bit more detail a little bit later on with him. We're going to talk to Martin Lipton about Arsenal last night and looking ahead to Tottenham over the weekend as well, and Lee McKenzie on her new Formula 1 book, and Kathleen is going to drop in because we have football to chat about. Scotland have been confirmed as the Republic of Ireland's opponents on Tuesday in that World Cup playoff, so we will get Kathleen's view on all of that. So that's all still to come. I was, Shane, I have to say, struck by the situation at Worcester, obviously, over the last week, and the fallout from that, and it being the latest stepping stone in the first place I went to was like, yet again, here we are, failed by sports administration. And it wasn't alone this week. There was a few things, but it was just this constant beat of a conversation that we've had before, and that we should go back to every now and then to sense check ourselves against. But I would definitely hold the view that sport shouldn't be allowed to run itself. Like, it's just proven time and time again at really high profile level that it's just not up to the task. Or better again, it's proven maybe that there are people at all levels of sport here and across the world who are just so craven so as to use it to mischievously strip you of your money, or to feather their own power base, or to just cheat the game, as has been happening in some areas that you would never have expected it, between Irish dancing or chess, even over the last couple of weeks. It does, in my view, absolutely, and the more evidence we see of this, the closer I believe we should get to this, which would be a watchdog or some sort of an auditor, or somebody that is seen to be whiter than white, who can hold sport to account at the highest level. A UN for sport, something like that, I think. An ultimate arbiter for stuff like, is it okay for the Saudi state to buy a Premier League club? We can't decide that ourselves because our interests are too vested. We'll outsource that to somebody else. And the same for Live Golf. Is it okay for this thing to set up, or is it not okay? And let's have a body in place that can decide that. Should a fighter who's just found to have been doped be allowed to fight anyway? Send that over, because boxing has proven it's not able to make that decision itself. Send that over to the arbiter. Is this top-level English club in rugby being run appropriately, or is it a shambles that's headed for financial ruin? We've proven we can't be the arbiter of that. We can't decide that. We're not able to audit them. Send that decision over there, outsource it. Has this World Cup bid process been run clean and fair? Is this guy who's running his National Football Association like his own personal Disneyland fit for purpose? Is it okay that a global drug cartel can find themselves basically running a sport, and on we go? And the scope of it doesn't need to be defined now. It can be debated and defined over the next while as we would work to something like that. And like, look, there are so many good people involved in sport and the running of sport and volunteers, but sport itself has just been has proven time and time again that it cannot be trusted to govern itself. And every sports club and association, excluding all, because it's the next natural step after that, that's grand. How do you fund that? I would exclude any amateur sports or any amateur associations or any non-profit making club or associations. And just, you're saying to all profit making clubs and associations, federations, etc., X percentage of the money you're making is going in over here to fund this, and that's just the way it works. And governments would need to get together to make this happen, but I believe it has to happen at some point. Yeah,
all very fair points. And it's kind of, it's sickening in that if you look 10 years ago even, maybe I'm wrong in saying this, but it feels like most sports we cover and off the ball, and we cover a lot of them, there have been negative stories around them, and it feels like every week we have maybe at least one negative story about sports. We've had obviously the Worcester story, as you mentioned. Qatar is not going to go away anytime soon over the next few months. Live Golf, you touched on as well. Daniel Kinahan's hands all over boxing. Like, it feels like you can't really enjoy. I think it was a year ago today, almost. I think it was to the day actually when the Saudis took over Newcastle, and like these stories go away. Like we mentioned it in the show yesterday morning. Like, we're all happy days talking about Erling Haaland and what he's brought to Man City, but the sports washing has worked because we've stopped talking about cities where they get their money.
And it should include stuff like that, and it should include stuff like the way the Glazers are running Man United, and just like let that be out there, and let somebody, because it's unfair to ask the people who are running the thing, who can't separate their need for the thing to succeed from what's going on at the club. And like, if you look at Worcester, obviously as an example, that most people here, do people really care here? They don't. It's a totally different system. There's some sympathy for it, and it comes across their radar in a 24, 48 hour news cycle, and on we go. But I just think there's just stuff like that. And like, I know you used the term negative, and I would say that you're probably representing a vast majority of people who look at it that way. But for me, it misrepresents the reality of the situation, because it suggests it as an outlier, and it's just not. This is just
commonplace
de
now.
rigueur,
Yeah, and it also highlights the Worcester stuff, especially like you're hearing in the news in the last 24 hours or so. Worcester having to sell the land around 6 ways, and players are obviously being allowed to leave the club now. And yeah, you're right in that the news cycle of Worcester and Wasps as well will depart. But even I think back to when Monaghan United went under, and the negativity that brings around the local area, and the word depression. It is a depression. People who have gone to football matches or rugby matches, like the Worcester Warriors rugby fans, will be in a bad place at the minute. And people might say sport doesn't matter, and in the grand scheme of things, you'd be right to say that. But so many people have got some great moments, and their life nearly revolves around those moments with Worcester. So I can feel for the fans. You feel for the players as well, who've been out of pocket for 4 or 5 months probably, but they'll go on and get new clubs. But it's the fans at the end of the day. And Steve Diamond, I know the director of rugby at Worcester, has come out quite clearly on Twitter, very pointed tweets towards the owners, and it's all going to come out in the wash, how and why Worcester went under, and all these things. Like, it would make you sick to the stomach, and it's going to come out eventually. But yeah, that's who you feel for, is people, the people involved in the club, the people, the tea ladies who've been there for decades, the fans who have followed the team for so long, and for a team like that to go under because of mismanagement, and the truth telling needs to start now. And yeah, Worcester is a little bit removed from us over here, but the English Premiership as a whole suffers because of it, and rugby in this hemisphere will suffer because of it indirectly. But yeah, it leads into everything we talk about, because I know you were talking about the Gary Neville stuff as well in Qatar, and we were kind of talking on the show all week about how do we cover the negativity in Qatar, because as Michael Denny said during the week on the evening show with Joe, and it will get to a point where you're just watching, Netherlands against Ecuador or whoever, or England against Iran, and you're talking about the football match, and like, are we taking part in sports washing by not constantly bringing up the human rights abuses and the situation in Qatar, I don't know what the best way to do it is. Like, I know Gary Neville's trying to get out there, get ahead of it and do his little piece.
Well, I have to say I've watched half of the documentary. I haven't had time to watch it all. I will watch the rest of it later on today. And he does say, like, watch the documentary before you make up your mind. And he does address all the issues that he should be addressing around LGBT rights and women's rights. It felt to me watching it as if it was a bit one-dimensional. I was waiting for the second question when he was talking to people about the impact of that stuff. I was waiting to dig into it a bit deeper. I was waiting for him to talk about some of the atrocities. That didn't, from what I've seen so far, materialise. And, like, look, Mark Dunning here has been in touch today. Something like a court of arbitration for sport might work, and maybe it's very legalistic, and obviously they're absolutely, like, clearly you need to have that aspect of it, but it can't either be hamstrung by months and months and years of delay about stuff. It does need to have different levels of response depending on something like the Ben Eubank fight this weekend. Obviously it needs to be able to turn that around pretty quickly. So look, I don't know, we'll see. Shane in touch here, another Shane on YouTube, says, as a Cavan man, I echo what Shane is saying. More people I know would prefer Munster as their second team. No real affiliation to Ulster Rugby at all. Seems to be the general tone of contact we've got coming in. And if you've got a view on it, if you're from that area, please do fire that into us. It's 8:15. You're watching OTB AM, brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. We're going to be back after the break. Martin Lipton, football writer. We're going to chat Arsenal and Spurs.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Off the Ball Daily.
A home for your favourite podcasts from Off the Ball. The performance rankings, a slight tangent, the crappy quiz, and you had to be there.
5 goals in 20 minutes. It's just, you can't do that. It's the Premier League. You can't do that.
Subscribe to the Off the Ball Daily podcast feed right now.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
Martin Lipton, good morning to you.
Good morning, how are we?
We're flying it, and we've, like last Friday, Arsenal and Tottenham to talk about, and it does feel as if it'll be maybe, I don't know, a slightly different conversation to last week in that events have happened, and now we know a little bit more about both of them. Arsenal beating Bodo Glimt last night 3-0. It felt like a result. I mean, look, there were kinks in the performance, but it felt like a result, and almost including last weekend, that you're coming to expect from this Arsenal group now. They're
playing really well. As I said last week, they've been the standout team in the league this season, and they've got a further chance to reinforce that on Sunday. And if they do, I don't think anyone can stop taking them seriously, as it were. You know, they'd have to be looked at as a viable, certainly as a top 4 certainty, I would say. And then maybe even if City were to slip, a potential champion. I think they're still unlikely to win the league. I think City are going to win it quite comfortably. But Arsenal have been, as I said, the best team so far this season. They proved it. They were infinitely better than Spurs, irrespective of whether or not it was a red card. I think it probably was. Last week, they're just better. But that doesn't mean anything in the greater scheme of things if they can't do it over the whole of the season. And the caveat that I brought in last week is still the same. We talked last week about how Arsenal would get on with injured players and using their squad, and they didn't have to. They picked their first 11. They were able to get everyone back. And it looks like they have a full squad on Sunday, but it's a very long season, and I still only think they got 14, 15 players.
Fabio Vieira was the man that really stood out last night, Martin, and I know it was first goal for Arsenal, but even aside from the goal, the setting up for the Rob Holding goal, the way he took the ball down and perfect whipped cross for that second Arsenal goal, he has something, this fella, well worth the whatever 30-35 million quid they've spent.
He showed that with the goal he scored at Brentford, didn't he? I mean, he's a very talented young boy, but obviously Arteta's not going to throw him into the mix of a Premier League game every week at the moment. He doesn't think that's right. He's going to look after him and nurture him, and again, that's it. Build him up until he's ready to play on a more regular basis. But it certainly gives them an extra string to the bow. There's no doubt about that, and I think they should be very pleased with his development. I think in 2 or 3 years we'll see the real player, and that will be something quite exciting for any Arsenal fan. Of that, I've no doubt.
Like a rare start for Eddie Nketiah, in from the cold a little bit maybe, but people almost forget, and I kind of only noticed this morning reading the back of the papers, like 12 goals in his last 15 starts for Arsenal, and yet you look ahead to Sunday against Liverpool, he will inevitably be sitting back on the bench. So must be frustrating for someone like Eddie Nketiah, such a great talent, and when he does start for Arsenal, he's usually very good. So it's a tricky one for Mikel Arteta.
It is. I mean, he was out of contract. It looked like he was going at the end of last season. There was a bit of a U-turn to give him a new deal. I think he was prepared to move on at that point, and it obviously hadn't happened. But he's going to start knocking on the door and saying, "Go and give me a game," if he's not playing. And that's only natural and right. You want to be playing football. He will be able to say to Arteta, "What more do you want from me? You asked me to score when I play, and I do. So what else?" But at the moment, obviously, he's got Gabriel Jesus, and I don't think anyone could argue that he doesn't deserve to start. And their formation has one striker, so it is difficult for Nketiah to see him getting too much football in the short term.
His little dribble, Jesus, along the end line for that goal was a thing of absolute beauty. Like some of the conversation you've just been having, the question Shane's been asking over the last while, obviously we've moved way beyond any idea that Mikel Arteta would be going anywhere anytime soon. Will you talk to us a little bit about him, Martin, and what, I think the worst thing that's thrown at him is that he's Pep light, which is, strikes me as still a compliment.
Well, I have that. Crikey. I might have been anyone like, to be honest. It'd be quite nice because I'm a bit heavy at the moment. But no, I think, look, it's clear that he worked with Guardiola and learned from Guardiola and brought in some of his ways. I don't think he's a deliberate carbon copy in any way, shape or form, but they are two peas from a similar pod. And you can tell that in their attitude, their thoughts about how the game should be played. I don't think he's quite as intense as Pep in terms of the training, and he's still very hard working, but it's not as rigid as I think people would say Pep is. But he's certainly reaping the benefits now of all the hard work he put in over the last couple of years, and also moulding a squad that's very much his squad as opposed to the one he inherited.
He's a bit more ruthless now as well, Martin. Arteta, I feel like he's, like last night, I know it's only Bodo Glimt, but when you have the lead in the Europa League game, and then he brings on Jesus, Saka, Odegaard, White, like he's really standing on the neck of some of the smaller teams, and it's that intensity that he's bringing, and he clearly isn't willing to let up and just bring on the young guns and let games peter out. He really wants to put on a show for the Arsenal fans at the minute.
Yeah, I do wonder whether that was in the long term the smart move, and that's not been a criticism other than there's so many games to play. Arsenal playing 9 games this month. They're going another couple, 2 or 3 before the World Cup break, and then they're going to have to play 24 league games plus domestic and European cups. We could be looking at 40 games after Christmas, and you can't keep on pushing players through. There's a genuine fear amongst at the top of the PFA in this country that there's going to be an epidemic of injuries because players are going to be overplayed this season. I would, if I'm 2-0 up at home and I'm Gabriel Jesus, I'm thinking I wouldn't mind having just sitting here for a bit. We've got Liverpool on Sunday. I don't need a half hour run out, but maybe at the moment, because everyone's feeling so positive, they just want to play, they want to be part of it, and he's working on that basis. I just wonder if come an injury crisis, which could happen, they might escape it. They might go through the entire season without any injuries. But if they do start picking up stress and strain injuries because of, just wear and tear, things like that might be complicit in that.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've previewed Arsenal Liverpool and felt that maybe this could be Arsenal's time, but it does feel as if, given form lines coming into the game, the fact that it's obviously a home game for Arsenal, that I don't know what the odds say, but they must be slight favourites.
I would say so. I say 55-45, maybe 60-40. Liverpool aren't in great nick, and they played better, I thought, in midweek against Rangers, but they were against a fairly ordinary Rangers side. They are a long way away from their best, and that means there's a vulnerability which Arsenal can exploit, particularly knowing that as you do that, Arsenal are going to try to get on the ball and force the pace of the game and ask those questions that we know at the back Liverpool don't like answering. And that's going to be the critical thing. And in previous games, even over recent seasons, Arsenal have huffed and puffed, and they've then run out of wind pretty early, and Liverpool picked them off quite comfortably. Now, I don't think that will happen this time. It may, of course, but I don't think it will. And Liverpool, were they to lose, with City presumably beating Southampton, I think they're playing, that gap becomes huge, doesn't it? It's big enough as it is now, but that you would struggle to find a way of justifying an argument that Liverpool can make it up. And again, the mentality of Liverpool then changes completely because they're not playing for the title anymore.
The longer it goes on, Martin, with Arsenal staying around about the top of the Premier League table, like, do you get the feeling that the Europa League will take on less significance for them as the league takes on more significance, or if they keep the results going, or is the Europa League a serious shot at a trophy for Mikel Arteta?
If they're not the favourites to win that trophy, I don't know who is, because they're definitely the best team and current form in that competition, and that would be in itself a vindication, because also it's just in case they blow up in the league. I'm not saying they will, by the way, but just in case you win the Europa League, you're in the Champions League next season anyhow. You know the trophy itself is actually worth less than the prize that it leads to in many ways. The only thing you don't get is a share of the market pool. But other than that, you get all the Champions League money. And were I Arsenal, I don't see any reason why I would not want that to be an ambition, whilst going for other things domestically as well.
There was the very sad news from Tottenham yesterday of the passing of, at the age of just 61, their fitness coach Gianpiero Ventrone, and lots of lovely tributes paid to him. Harry Kane, Son, Dyer, there's a lot of players that were out. He seems like to have been held in a huge amount of affection, which must have been quite the talent, given that he was the guy responsible for the famous putting them through their paces pre-season piece. He must have been quite the presence around the place, Martin.
What I'm told, there was an awful lot of respect for him. He was a rather hard taskmaster in pre-season in particular. He literally made them sick. But I think they recognised that he was doing it for a greater purpose. And I think on a human level, it appears he was a really, and I've not met him, I don't know, it appears he was a really decent fella. They all seem to have huge respect and regard for him. And this would have been a huge and devastating blow to the club, one that will have rocked the club over the last 24 hours or so. I mean, the fact that they cancelled the press conference yesterday with Conte was no surprise. I thought that was going to happen because obviously he's one of his closer acolytes, and it will be a blow. But they're professional footballers, and they'll talk about winning the game in his memory, I assume, against Brighton. That will be the aim, and then they can dedicate it to him. And I know that's a trite thing, because nothing can compare to the loss of someone in these circumstances. But that's the nature of professional sport, isn't it? You often look for a galvanising cause.
When we had you on last week, we were talking about, there was a headline at the back of your own paper in The Sun about Conte putting pen to paper, and you were saying, look, this is a good situation for everybody. But I mean, like, you take the results of the last week and you pair them with obviously the Sporting result last month. I know the Leicester result is there as a bit of it looks in the context of everything else to be almost a bit of an outlier, and maybe not a great reflection on Leicester more than anything else. But again, another blank during the week. The result obviously from Saturday lunchtime against Arsenal, which will have bitten deep for Spurs fans. And they have Brighton this weekend, and like, they're flying it. So what's a result there? Like, maybe a draw is a good result. They have Frankfurt again obviously next week. They have Everton, they have United to come. So a couple of sticky patches there. We could be talking over the next couple of weeks about a very different conversation about this Tottenham team, and maybe about Conte. No, don't think so. There's no question that the club want Conte to stay long term. They haven't played well this season, but they still, look at the table. They're third in the league. They've lost 2 matches in all competitions. I think most of them will take that. Look where they were last season, a total and utter mess. They're not that now. They're actually missing Kulusevski more than I think people anticipated, since he's missed 2 games, and that's shown. They lack that extra thrust. Son isn't playing very well despite his hat-trick. And I think there's a call from fans to consider changing shape and going to a midfield, a 3 in the central midfield, which would include Bissouma playing. But whenever you don't win a match, fans get the hump at every club, even if it's a couple and 2 games. Oh dear! And then they win the next match, and people start to think, calm down. I'm fairly happy with where Tottenham are. I just wish they were playing a little bit better, but that happens in a season. And there's certainly no sense of panic or drift or inertia there. They just think it's part of the ebb and flow of the season.
The Matt Doherty question kind of took a lot of headlines over here, Martin, in Ireland, understandably, when Antonio Conte brought him up in the press conference. And just so I can quote him directly, he said, "Also, Doherty last season played every game. Now, I'm not seeing him in the right way to start the game. I'm not stupid. I don't want to lose. I try to pick the best team. Now, maybe these comments are taken out of context. Maybe there's a minor language barrier and he didn't say what he meant to say. But from one perspective, it seems like he was quite damning about Matt Doherty."
Well, it looks like he hasn't recovered from the injury, doesn't it? Simple as that. The injury has taken its toll, and that sometimes that can happen, because he was playing really, really well until he got injured. But then he was out for quite a while, and certain players take longer to return and recover from such things than others. The other thing, for all the stick that Emerson Royal gets, and he deserved to be sent off, he's actually been pretty consistent this season and much better than last season. So you get Royal, who's played relatively well and is fit, versus Doherty, who he trusts as a player when he's right, but he doesn't think he's right, and Spence, who he doesn't quite think is ready yet. So you pick the one who's ready and available. Except, of course, this weekend and the next two, Emerson Royal isn't available. So it'll have to be Doherty or Spence, and I would have thought it'd be Doherty. I mean, he could try and play Perisic on the right again. That didn't work against Leicester. So my assumption would be that it would be Doherty.
And is your assumption or your expectation on Saturday evening that the goals start to come back, that Tottenham get all this right again? I mean, who knows with Brighton at the minute, but as I said, they do look good, but that the train gets back on track?
Honestly, I've no idea. I mean, I remember when they went down to Pochettino and got absolutely thumped 3-0, and it was basically the beginning of the end, if not the middle of the end for Pochettino. Other seasons, last year they won 2-1 away at Brighton, or 2-0 away, and then lost 1-0 at home. Brighton were a good team, and they caused problems for anyone, and it wouldn't shock me if they got a result, as they did at Liverpool last week. Spurs just need a goal, I think, at the moment to get themselves going. I thought they were much better on Tuesday night than they were at Arsenal, despite not scoring. I thought there were 4 or 5 occasions when it just needed a touch in front of goal, and with that quality of striker, they're going to score. I mean, they are still the third highest scorers in the league. It's not as if they're falling apart.
Really interested to listen to Peter Crouch talking about the Tottenham style of play under Conte in the last number of days, Martin, where he talked about the getting chances in the counter-attack, but he felt that they maybe defended too deep. He'd like to see them be more expansive and progressive. I think he used the word aggressive as well. Like, what's your take on that? And I know Conte is maybe not going to be combing the papers reading to what Peter Crouch thinks of his playing style, but I mean, Crouch compared it to the style that he had at Stoke when he was playing there. So is it a style of play that you think needs altered in any way?
I don't think it really compares with the way Stoke played, I've got to be honest. It's an interesting argument from Peter. I think that the fans definitely would like that extra body in midfield. I think they feel that that's where there's a lack of intensity at times at the moment. And were that to happen and not work, then you look at it. But we know with Conte, he's going to play his way, because his way has always been successful for him. And relatively recently successful for him. Not as if he was only successful 15 years ago. We're talking about in the last 4 or 5 years. Chelsea played a relatively reactive way and won the title comfortably in 16-17. He knows what he wants to do, and he'll keep doing it his way. And he trusts that at the end of last season, in fact, this year, I think only City have got more points than Spurs. It's not as if they've been struggling all season or all year. They've just had a little blip in the last week or so.
Martin, thanks a million.
Thanks, take care.
Thanks a lot, Martin Lipton, football writer. 8:33 Friday morning. Where are you at this morning? And you're on your way to work, whatever it is you're up to, do get in contact with us. Plenty of comments coming in. We should mention as well, by the way, Shamrock Rovers losing 3-0 at Malta last night. Not showing themselves in the best light was how Tommy Martin described it in his analysis. He was talking to Brian Kerr and Damien Delaney last night in Virgin Media. Byrne, Burke, Gaffney among those on the bench last night. And, I know there's the context of a big game coming this weekend against Shelbourne, and that's the setting for all of this stuff as people tried to make sense of why they lost 3-0, and it could have been more. I have to say, it definitely could have been more looking at the highlights yesterday evening. Yeah. But the prizes on offer for this, I just did wonder, like at a club that was run slightly differently, and I'm not, by the way, in the context of the previous conversation, the Shamrock Rovers are run just fine, but a club that were maybe more profit orientated, that the vast sums of money that even for a draw like that in the tournament, in the Conference League would dwarfs the amount of money that you can win for the entire league in the League of Ireland. I just did wonder, like, there must be at least some part of Stephen Bradley saying, oh, I mean, that money would also be kind of good to, like you're basically accepting that you ain't getting anything, but you're going out there with, if you're not showing yourself in the best light in terms of your team selection. Yeah,
you wonder what it's all for then. Like, what's the point in winning the Irish domestic league if you're going to go into the...
And all the celebrations
and not perform to your best.
The whole country was like delighted for them, and it was like, then suddenly we're just not going to bother putting Jack Byrne in the team.
It was strange, very strange, and as you mentioned, like even I think it's over 100 grand, well over 100 grand for a draw in the Europa League group stages. So like it would be so financially beneficial for them to even pick up a draw last night. Now Mulder were the better team by far, and 3-0 was possibly kind on Shamrock Rovers, but. When you see the personnel on the bench last night, it's a little bit confusing. You're wondering what's the story here. Why? Like, inevitably, if Derry City hadn't been breathing down their necks, the team selection would have been different last night. If they're running away with the domestic title, grand. You can see why they would then put out their strongest team, but it leaves a strange taste in the mouth because you're like, what's the point in Irish teams getting
from
to the level?
the players' point of view?
Yeah,
surely like Byrne. Burke,
wanted to play.
Gaffney are looking at that going, these are the games that I want to be here, I want to be involved, like this is why we do it. Like, and like, it was Dan or somebody was on recently making the point that these are the games that people who are not into the League of Ireland will take notice of because they're on terrestrial TV against, European opposition. I don't know.
No, I didn't like it. And now maybe there's some Shamrock Rovers fans who can get in touch with us and let us know what they think, because there is understandably a desire to go on and win the Electricity Premier Division as well. And Derry City are going very well, so you kind of have to win this weekend against Shelbourne. But I don't like it.
166k for a draw.
What is it?
$500,000.
$500,000 for a win.
Like, that's not beyond the realms of possibility. Mulder come to town, I think, is it next week?
Yeah.
Like, Rovers, go for it. Like, just, those sums of money coming into the league to look at, they don't come in and then sort of get parachuted around all the other clubs. They'll go and sit, as they did with Dundalk a number of years ago when they went their run in the Europa League. They sit with the club or whatever. But like, Jesus, I don't know. Just for a league that so often struggles financially, to have somebody bringing in the opportunity to bring in those sums of money just seems.
The cynical side of me would almost think that maybe Stephen Bradley's thinking about that home leg and thinking, right, the money is so good for a draw and so good for a win that almost not quite accept defeat in Norway, but
and go for it in Dublin. Well, we'll see. Give us a few days and we find out.
Yeah, makes sense.
Isolt, good morning to you. Says with boxing, nothing changes ever. It continually finds new lows, and unfortunately, with no centralised governing body for the pros and corrupt one for the amateurs, as she puts it, it's impossible to see changes. Being a boxing fan is honestly draining. And I'm sure there's plenty of people out there this morning that would echo all of that. We've loads still to come. It's 8:37. It's Friday morning. You're watching OTB AM. Shane and myself with you. Kathleen will be along very shortly to look back on the pre-playoff to the playoff between Scotland and Austria last night and give us a bit of a preview as to what we can expect on Tuesday evening for the Republic of Ireland. We're going to talk to Alan Quinlan to look ahead to the URC. Lee McKenzie is going to talk to us about her new book on Formula 1. So loads still to come. And by the way, do keep those comments coming into us as well. OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. But right now it is time for the sports pages.
There are so many idiots out there, so many spoofers. There's a lot of horse.
I think he's a total spoofer.
What do you mean a spoofer?
He's just bullshit.
No, Eamon, come on, don't be. No, I'm not having that. No.
The Herald we're going to start with, and it's the same story in the Independent. It's a story, the picture from the game last night of Shamrock Rovers there. And by the way, I did notice that their jersey last night was absolutely class.
Yeah. Slick.
Cracker, isn't it?
Very slick. I like the sleeves. The
really nice. Bit of a throwback sort of a thing.
Yeah.
Boylan is back in Meath Camp is the headline from Donegal Boyle here, and it's carried across a lot of the other papers as well. O'Rourke standing down from teaching role to focus on royal task. So he's packed in his job after 42 years. At St Pat's College. He's been principal obviously for the last number of years, St Pat's in Navan, and he's gone over to Sean Boylan and he said, listen Sean, I don't know really what I have in mind for you, but it's kind of been outrageous that you have been involved over the last number of years. Whatever you want to do, if you want to come in and give the speech before the first league game, it's all yours. If you want to dip in once a week, dip in once a month, come and join us.
You'd be mad not to get him involved.
Isn't it great?
You'd be mad not to get him. Like, I remember we had an event up in Monaghan Harps for our local club where we had a few different speakers. It was a fundraising night, and Sean was up and David Brady was up, and there was a number. Sean Kavanagh was there, and like when Sean Boylan spoke, I mean, you can hear a pin drop in the room.
We've a clip doing the rounds at the minute. We're trying to get people to sign up to get pre-notice for events, and there's a clip of him at a show, and he's talking about actually the night that Colin O'Rourke, funnily enough, and Lyons and a few of the other players had called around to his gaff when things hadn't gone so well, and they knocked on the door. The mother sent them up to the house and said, "You lads go up there and sort it out." And one of them, might have been Lyons, said to him, "You put your shyness in your back pocket." You know that clip?
Yes.
And it's a brilliant, in the context of what's going on at the minute, it's a brilliant clip. But so there's that aspect to it. But Colin O'Rourke is putting his money where his mouth is, literally, by saying, "I can't do this job while I'm doing that job." Now he's probably, actually, I'm not exactly sure what age he is, but he strikes me as the sort of fella who's probably close enough to retirement age anyway. So he maybe brought that a couple of years to give this his best shot, and more luck to him.
I don't think anyone could be a intercounty manager while being principal of a school. It's just nowadays it's a full-time job, you know, and he'd obviously have until the league starts to do the teaching roles. But I think Meath fans will be quite happy to see Colin O'Rourke giving full focus to that, and even more happy to see Sean Boylan in the mix as well. I mean, Meath, the second best team in Leinster.
They're probably the fourth best, Shane, but I mean,
fourth best. Sorry, Adrian. Yeah, of course, Westmeath above them in your books. Kildare second. This is our official.
I'm not sure Kildare. Maybe I wandered into that earlier on. I'm not sure Kildare second. We'll see. GA helped Dublin to dominate, says O'Neill. This is a story by Frank Roach here, and Donald O'Neill, one of those that set up the GPA, saying that the GA does not do enough to lift standards among the weaker counties, and that's obviously despite the introduction of the Talton Cup. So interesting stuff there. This is the Irish Daily Mirror. Rashford sets the benchmark. Super Sub Marcus gets nervy Reds out of jail in Cyprus, and pretty disconsolate looking Shamrock Rovers at the top of the paper there as well. The Sun this morning, mould damage. Bradley prioritise home safety. This is the 3-0 defeat last night. Obviously other reaction there to the European action last night. I'll make you pay. Chris Vow as Ben drug test KO's bout, and Arvira best is needed. This is about the game on Tuesday night. That is that. The Star, rash and grab, obviously on the match last night. Eubank Jr. to school Ben later, he says. The Irish Daily Mirror this morning, 900 grand a week revealed Halland's mammoth city pay thanks to hefty bonuses. So he's on some sort of a basic pay that's roughly in line with everybody else, and then the bonuses, which don't even include the mountains of goals that he's scoring, bring him up to almost basically he's earning 45 million a year.
Reasonably rich man at 22 years of age. You got to keep your head on your shoulders and not get too carried away with the money. Although he's still eating his dad's lasagnas before the home matches. I know Alf Inga has been cooking lasagna.
What's
before
so special
every.
about that?
I don't know. I think before every single home game he cooks him a lasagna. Erling put a photo up of his lasagna before the Copenhagen game the other night. That is the trick, I think. I think you're going to have kids now before matches hearing Haaland eats lasagna. I think lasagna sales are going to go through the roof. And why wouldn't it? I mean, if it works for him.
Yeah, that's definitely the conclusion. Lasagna.
And it's not his innate natural talent.
Pow, we need best game ever to advance. That's the report there from Mark Gallagher on the Scotland 1 Australia 0 result last night, and looking ahead obviously to next week as well. Just a couple more here. The Examiner first, being straight about it. Duncan Casey on the anxieties raised by rugby dementia documentary, and plenty more inside as well. And the last one for now is the Irish Times, which is disappointed Alan Manus and fellow Shamrock Rovers players in Mulder last night after the loss. Impressive Arsenal maintained their season, and Rashford gets United out of jail. That is the Irish Time for you this morning. That is the sports pages.
There are so many idiots out there, so many spoofers. There's a lot of horse.
I think he's a total spoofer.
What do you mean a spoofer?
He's just bullshit.
No, Eamon, come on, don't be. No, I'm not having that. No.
Now it's 8:45 and Kathleen is with us, so we're going to talk some football. First of all, let's get the innermost thoughts of Vera Pauw after the Scotland win over Austria last night, confirming we would play them at Hampden Park on Tuesday night.
Yeah, Scotland was by far the better team, and that was a bit surprisingly because we've seen Austria playing against the very, very top teams, magnificent games. But tonight it was all over the pitch for Scotland.
Is it a good thing for us that it went to extra time for those two teams?
Yeah, of course. And they have played under 20 minutes, but there's 4 rest days, so physically they will be ready. But yeah, the emotions, we need to see how they handle that. On the other hand, They have played home now. They don't travel. They stay there. They have the advantage of the perception of Hampden Park. So we need to play our best game ever. Nothing has changed in that.
Yeah, Tuesday night, Hampden Park, Republic of Ireland. Vera Pauw's Republic of Ireland up against Scotland. Kathleen, good morning to you.
Good morning, guys.
The goal that won it in the end was a corner kick. It was the first period of extra time.
2 minutes into it.
2 minutes into it, and it was a corner kick. It dropped in a place that it really shouldn't have been dropping, and very close to the too close to the Austria goal to not have been dealt with in a way that like a Louis Quinn or somebody else. And look at who knows, after that number of minutes of football, everybody's knackered and you don't have the same enthusiasm or energy to get to the ball. But it definitely looked like a goal that Austria are kicking themselves about this morning.
I think so, and it was kind of symptomatic of the game as well. Like, it was absolutely lashing at Hampden Park. It was just miserable football. The grass was kind of long. Every single shot that both teams put in just was quite poor. The players you expected to play well didn't really get a foothold in the game. The likes of Caroline Weir. I know we were talking about Bia as well before the start of the show. They managed, Scotland managed to handle Austria quite well, and probably played to their strengths in the fact that it was a bit of a dirty night for football. But I think that goal is the exact sort of one that's probably going to win it on Tuesday. I see us going toe-to-toe with a team like Scotland. I don't think either side is going to run away with it. I certainly hope Scotland aren't going to run away with it. But I think it will be that sort of free kick, corner, set piece set up, and someone just gets ahead on the end of it and gets it into the net.
That was Vera Pauw, by the way, speaking to FAI TV last night after that game. No fear for us was how Sue Ronan put it when she was talking to Nathan on the show last night. It was just interesting. Obviously, she'd been keeping an eye on events, and I know, obviously, when the draw was made, people were like, oh, well, Scotland would be the ideal draw here, and there's the Celtic rivalry, and they're a bit closer to home, and we might get a few fans over and all that sort of stuff. The playoff, the evidence of the 90 plus minutes, obviously, then sort of maybe tailors your view slightly after that, because after they've beaten Austria, then at that point you're kind of like, well, maybe we would have played the worst team. But specifically, you mentioned earlier on, obviously in relation to Nicole Bia, and one of the better Austrian players who Scotland really managed to keep quiet on the night and was brought off before the end of normal time. So it sent me straight to thinking, if that's how they can deal really efficiently with one of Austria's best players, what have we got in store?
Well, I think the thing about this Scotland team at the moment, and I was talking to Emma Byrne about it at the start of the week, they're in a really good place. They obviously had the disappointment, much like ourselves, of not making it to the Euros, but they're injury-free at the moment. I haven't heard anything since last night that anyone is coming in with any injuries. They're mentally in a really good space. Physically, they're in a really good space. A lot of their top players, you've Caroline Weir putting in bangers over in Real Madrid. Every single week you have the likes of Erin Cuthbert, who's at Chelsea, also doing really, really well. They were always going to be in a good spot. I think the reason why I would have preferred them to Austria is that I do think we know their players a little bit better. A lot of them would play in the WSL. They're more familiar to us than the Austrians. I think the style of play is a bit more similar to Ireland. Much like ourselves, they have that kind of small country football mentality where they know how to... They rely on set pieces. They rely on those kind of grab moments where you grab the goal and then you defend for your life. So I think that's why I wanted to play them more than Austria. Austria would... I watched them a couple of times during the Euros and in some of the warm-up games before as well, and when they want, they can play really nice football. They can play really nice one-touch football. It wasn't really happening last night because of the length of the grass and the rain, but I feel like we would have struggled with them a bit more than we would have Scotland.
It's when you mention no injuries for Scotland, you still think to Kim Little retiring and maybe how things could have been different, and would she have considered, if she'd known how Scotland were going to progress, would she have considered coming out of retirement? Obviously captaining Arsenal in the WSL, so a player they could maybe do with. But the players you mentioned there, like Cuthbert and Weir specifically, how do we nullify them? Because they even with Sue Ronan last night, they seem to be the two names that were cropping up quite often.
I think it's probably the same question they're asking themselves, like, how do we nullify Katie McCabe and Denise O'Sullivan? You know, they are almost like the equivalents for Scotland.
Yeah.
I think what they did, what Austria did really well last night with Caroline Weir is, like, she's one of the best midfielders out there, and when she gets onto the edge of the box, she's really dangerous in terms of sending in those rockets. So they just really effectively marked her out of the game. They had 2 players on her at various different times, and that is a big commitment because it obviously leaves you with a lot of space, but I think it probably is worth it. Someone like Erin Cuthbert, I mean, her and Katie McCabe have had so many battles in the WSL, and generally they're kicking lumps out of each other whenever Chelsea and Arsenal meet, so she'll definitely be a good person to know how to handle Cuthbert. I think the thing with her is she's so dynamic. She can play literally any position and do it very, very well. So it'll be making sure that we don't let her have the space that she needs to make those runs. And yeah, it's going to be difficult, especially with the injuries we have. I'm not all that optimistic about a win.
Really?
Don't say it, Kathleen. Don't say it.
I don't know. Maybe it is just me trying to like set myself up so that I don't get too disappointed as well. Because
because of the injuries, is that the?
I think because of the injuries, like mentally, I know the squad is in a good place, and I think it is one of the better opportunities we've had. And I'm not. God, I'm absolutely setting myself up to curse us now. I'm not expecting us to make the stupid mistakes that we have in the past. I think like we have moved on from that, but I just don't know with the injuries that we have. I mean, they're all starting players. They're all people that are very good. Jessu, before she got that knee injury, was really on the up and a really exciting player for us. You know,
Marisha Littlejohn had started to come into the team and be a regular starter and make her stamp on it, and there was the whole going home to Scotland thing and all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's just some of that should have been written in the stars, but
stop.
Like
No
at
negativity.
least it's
Stop
not.
it. Stop it.
At least it's not Katie and Denise. Or is that the? Can we agree on that at least? That
yeah.
is-
Well,
like that would be that
touch
would feel
wood.
to me-
I'm literally going to hug the desk as you say that. There's
that would
something.
that would feel to me to be a much, you know, it's like hopefully I think we can still get through this because we still have those two, and like who knows.
And even for them as well, like this is such a big moment for them. You know, they've worked for this for so long and they deserve it so much. I don't think I've ever felt nervous for a qualifier in this way. Maybe around the end of the Euros, but this just feels different after all that heartbreak.
You'd like to see Denise O'Sullivan pick up the ball in the right positions. Like that was an interesting thing Sue mentioned last night, that maybe Jamie Finn or Lily Agg or someone like that could take up the number 6 role and allow Denise to move further forward. Probably too close to the game for Vera Pauw to change anything drastically, but it would be nice to see Denise in a threatening position on the pitch.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how she does set up, because for the last few games she did go a little bit more attacking than we're used to seeing her set up the play, but I wonder with the injuries that we have, is she just going to go full throttle defensive and, a bit like I was saying earlier, hope for that set piece that comes along where, you know, she's able to get a Louise Quinn header or whatever it might be, or a Katie McCabe free kick, and rely on that to get us through. I just don't have a lot of faith that Vera is going to set us up for an entirely attacking display. I think, you know, she'll let Denise get her space, and Denise will do what she always does, which is no matter what position she plays in, she's always on the ball, she's always running like kilometres around everyone else. But I think her and Katie are obviously going to be key, but Scotland are going to know that, so we are going to need a good performance from someone that maybe wouldn't be expected to be the standout player or the person of the match, because I mean that's what happened with Scotland last night. You know, it wasn't Erin Cuthbert took the set piece, but it wasn't one of their most recognisable names. You know, it was a substitute, Abby Harrison, that came on and scored. So I think we're going to need another Lily Agg moment or something to see us through.
Just finally from me, Kathleen, like getting the game on terrestrial television looks, I don't know if unlikely is the word. I know RTE have contracts with the Champions League, so it would be nice to see this game in the public eye as it should be. Definitely.
I mean, this is one of the biggest moments for Irish football. I know it's a convoluted playoff process and we're not guaranteed, even if we win, we're not guaranteed an actual spot at the World Cup, but it is really hard to underestimate or underemphasize how massive it will be if we do qualify on Tuesday, and how massive next summer will be in terms of Irish sport. And I would love to see, whether it's RTÉ, whether it's Virgin, whether it's TG Cahir, like someone in the country picking up this game, showing it on like main live TV. Like, even just the fact that if pubs want to show it, like, this is the sort of match you should be going to sit in a pub with your mates with a pint, or sitting at home in front of the TV with your kids, like, telling them this is history in the making, this is an Irish team on the edge of going to a World Cup. You know, Quinny McCabe, Denise O'Sullivan, whoever it might be, these are Irish sporting icons. So if someone doesn't pick it up, and if it isn't on main TV, then I think that's a serious moment missed. And I think it also shows that we have a long way to go when it comes to making sure we give these things the platform that they deserve.
And I think that's a fair conversation. And maybe if they can't get it on one of the main channels, they should just hand it over to Virgin. I think that would be like real public service, if I could word it that way. And anyway, don't worry about any of that. It'll be fully live on Off the Ball on Tuesday night from 8 o'clock. You will have a full commentary team bringing you the game from Hampden Park, and that's really all you need to know about it.
Yeah, sticking with the Scottish theme, and cheers to that, Kathleen, but we've got Lee McKenzie, Scottish broadcaster, on the line. Morning, Lee, how are things?
Morning, I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Keeping well. I've been busy reading this book for anyone unfamiliar. Inside F1, your journey, and your I guess it tells a story through 7 different drivers across the years, and how they've impacted your life and how their careers have impacted the lives of Formula One fans as well. Like, your own interest in Formula One, and this is something I hadn't realised when I was reading the introduction to the book, stemmed very, very much so from your dad.
Yeah, it's I was the sort of annoying child that turned up absolutely everywhere. I had covered an awful lot of rugby. I had attended athletics, Formula One, everything really by about the age of, 13, 14, 15. And then you just sort of look around one day and you think, I wonder if I could earn money by still coming to sport and pretending it's a proper job. And really that's what I've done since.
Like, when you're watching Formula One races on TV, and you reference the Ayrton Senna, Roland Ratzenberger tragedy at Imola in 1994, like, did moments like that wake you up to the dangers of the sport and covering those dangers to a greater degree? It must have been quite a turning point to watch that on television, for example. Yeah,
I mean, I was too young to be going to the sport then, but it did make you suddenly sit up and think, okay, this is a sport with consequences, because, my background was all horses, and I knew if I fell off, you'd be sore, you could be injured, you could break your arm, whatever. It could be much worse, but I don't think as a kid that you really appreciate that. The other sports, you see people limping off in rugby and things. When I was that age, again, I didn't maybe realise the consequences. But somebody crashing into a safety barrier had huge consequences. But it bizarrely didn't put me off. It just sort of made me understand it a lot earlier than a lot of people would have, possibly.
Yeah, it really puts things in perspective, and the dangers of the sport, for sure. Like, for anyone who was interested in the book, so David Coulthard writes the foreword, and then you've got a chapter on 7, all individually fascinating drivers. So Michael Schumacher, Lewis Hamilton, Sebastian Vettel, Max Verstappen, Fernando Alonso, Felipe Massa, and Jenson Button. All interesting characters. Like, we might maybe start on Michael Schumacher, because I know you have a deep interest in plenty of sports, but equestrian sports might be right up there. And yourself and Michael, that's something that you both shared, and that there's a really, really fascinating anecdote you touch on in the book where you end up on Michael's ranch, essentially.
Yeah, we used to talk about a lot of sports. I love it when you meet different athletes that you can talk of sort of a wide variety of sports. And Michael was one of those people. A lot of people, most people wouldn't appreciate that. But his family had the huge ranch, and actually they still do, and in Texas as well. But their love of equestrian was Western riding. So reining, the sort of Stetsons, the chaps, the sliding, and it's not something that we particularly do in the UK, certainly. But he gave me a challenge to compete at the European Championships against him. So I took a horse from West Sussex. I had no idea about Western riding, and I still don't, to be fair. And I took this horse from West Sussex over to Switzerland and competed against him. And we did an interview, and it was great fun. But yeah, I did stand on the same step of the podium as Michael, albeit wearing a Stetson and chaps. And yeah, it was very, very surreal.
That's one for the grandkids. Stand on the same podium as Michael Schumacher. Interestingly, Lee, we had an Irish basketball commentator, Timmy McCarthy, on the show recently, where he was talking about his first time meeting Michael Jordan and interviewing Michael Jordan and the imprint that left on him. Like, for you, that first time that you got to interview Michael Schumacher face to face must be quite a nerve-wracking moment, but then you're a professional as well, so you're also trying to get the questions right. Like, what type of interviewee was he?
You had to be really sharp. You had to know what you were doing. You had to get your prep in order, because Michael was the sort of master of turning it back on you. And maybe a bit like a politician, he would just sort of talk at you and change the rhetoric to exactly what he wanted. But then it was my duty to try and navigate him back to, yeah, well, that's all very well. You might have been fastest in lap 23, but you weren't on 24, 25, 20. And it was just sort of like doing it with the respect, but also letting him know that I knew what he was up to. And it was interesting, like, writing this, because I went back through so many old interviews for each driver. And the ones with Michael, I was actually really quite firm in the interview with him, much more than I ever remembered. I was kind of watching them back going, oh my gosh, I can't believe I asked that. But it was great. And it was nice to see the rapport again, because you forget things so quickly. Formula One is such a fast-moving sport in every sense that it moves on. You maybe do four interviews a week with these guys. So you're not going to remember everything, but doing the book, it's kind of like really jogged my memory.
And so you touch on it in the book as well, that he clearly is someone who transcended the sport, and we remember certain moments from his career, and one of them that stood out for me, and jogged my memory on it as well, was the 1998 Spa Grand Prix in Belgium, where the famous / infamous incident with David Coulthard and running down the pit lane towards him. That must have been quite a race to cover, given the it's one that we still talk about so many years later.
Yeah, that was probably, I was there on work experience. I was still at university at the time. In fact, I was probably I think I just started university, but I was doing work experience. That was the first one that I went to in a sort of proper role. And I still presented the Belgian Grand Prix a few weeks ago for Channel 4. And there is no Belgian Grand Prix that goes past that we don't use the footage of DC causing absolute chaos and Michael trying to like run down and punch him, because I obviously present the programme with David. So if there's ever an opportunity to show the absolute chaos that he caused, we'll always bring out that footage.
We might move on to Lewis Hamilton, because there's a great chapter on Lewis as well, and the type of character he is, and how he's changed over the years as well. Maybe mellowed to some degree, as drivers tend to do it towards the end of their careers. You referenced, and there was a great thing, a quote from the book, where you said, during an interview with Lewis, he talked about, when I went for my first signing for McLaren, I remember Ron Dennis looking me up and down because I had baggy jeans, didn't necessarily have the smartest of outfits on. My dad always told me, you've got to look the part. And that was really interesting, that when he started off with McLaren, he went from this kid with the braids and dressing the way he dresses now, to be fair, to this prim and proper young kid who wanted that place on the grid.
Yeah, I mean, I think how he's dressing now is like completely exacerbated. Every day is like a fashion parade, but the camera's just set up now for every time Lewis enters the paddock, because what he wears will make global news, which is just really bizarre. You don't get that, when I'm standing freezing doing Champions Cup at the RDS or something, I'm not exactly waiting for a Johnny or someone to come strutting in like some like major fashion statement. But Formula One, you get a bit of that as well. But Lewis, I think, is actually closer to the person he was when he was 17, 18, 19.
Sorry,
at this stage.
Just struggling with your line there, Lee. We're going to get you back in 1 second. Just 1 second. Just a bit of a choppy one. Bit like the F1 paddock, trying to interview people on the...
Good analogy.
Nice segue.
It's a bit like when Bowie goes on and our tennis segments tend to go through the roof. I have a feeling that Formula One might be making F1 fans out there.
It's probably, I think it's when you see Martin Brundle before the Formula One races doing the pit lane walks and interviewing, and it's absolute carnage. You've got the celebrities, you've got the drivers, and you've got the teams trying to get the last minute preparations together. So there's that mix between the ridiculous and the celebrities trying to get their little photo ops and words in with the drivers, and then these people in a multi-million-dollar industry trying to get the preparations done on their car, the last minute bits and bobs, drivers listening to music or getting their last minute preparations in. It's one of the great things in sport, I think, is watching Martin Brundle do what he does.
It's quality, and it's so unique as well, because how do you get that sort of access to be up close? And not necessarily, he does obviously harangue drivers every now and then, but like, you know, not necessarily. It'd be like walking around the tunnel before a football match and just grabbing people all over the place.
Yeah, but Lee does it brilliantly as well, where you're with Formula 1 drivers especially. I know most top sports people have egos, but I think Formula 1 drivers particularly have a certain sense of entitlement and ego, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think you're allowed to, when you're at the top of your game. And I mentioned it to Jerry yesterday. Like, I was down with Alex Dunn, the young Formula 4 driver from Clonbelogan Offaly. He gave me a few spins around Mondello Park last week, and he's only 16, but there is a cockiness to him as well that I really liked. Because I was going down there thinking, he's going to be a meek little 16-year-old. He doesn't even have his driving licence, but he's driving in Formula 4. But he had there was a little edge about him. And I think when you're getting behind the wheel of a very fast motor car, you kind of have to have the edge about you. So for people like Lee to navigate these interviews with egos like Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen and Massa and Schumacher, like, there's not one of them not touched by ego.
I mean, it's one of the most egotistical, is that fair enough, sports, you would think, and also it's just at that elite level. Like, I mean, when you consider the number of, even though the Premier League is like the elite of the elite, you look at the number of players, right? There's hundreds of them in the Premier League, and in Formula 1 you have what is it?
It's 20 drivers on the grid.
20.
And like, and you think of all the drivers just beyond that 20 who are trying to get their seat on the grid as well. Not an easy thing to do, but yeah, I'd be really just. It's a job that I'd love to get down to the paddock at some stage and interview some drivers there. That's the dream. That's up there with my covering space launches. Adrian is my
right.
Not that this isn't.
I think one is more easily achievable than the other. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't know how you're going to get into the paddock to do some interviews.
It's tough. We have Lee McKenzie back on the line. Lee, we're just talking there about the madness of the paddock interviews and like people like yourself and Martin Brundle have to do these interviews where you've got the mania of celebrities trying to get their little moments with the drivers, but then you've got, as I say, a multi-million-dollar industry of teams running around and drivers trying to prepare. It must be quite a manic environment, and you touch on it very well in the book as well.
Yeah, I think if you use Miami as the example, which was quite a famous one with Martin earlier on this year, Miami we just called rather disparagingly the Instagram Grand Prix because it was madness. You know, there was like anyone who lived within a sort of 2,000-mile vicinity of Miami turned up on the grid on that day. And it was just, you couldn't do your job. I mean, that's what it came down to. You just actually couldn't do your job. The drivers were getting really annoyed because they were just in some sort of media frenzy, celeb frenzy. And ultimately, they have a job to do. Literally 5 minutes later, they love it when we all get off the grid. They can put their visor down, sit in the car and just get to work, because anything before that is just a distraction. And it does really amaze me that we get as close as we do to the drivers literally just before they're going to, sit there and tear off at like 200 kilometers an hour. I think it's just, I hope it lasts. I'm not sure how long it will last, but I really hope it does, because that's something which is so different about Formula 1. One
of the great stories you also touched on in the book was the manic nature of the 2008 Brazilian Grand Prix, when we had that Hamilton versus Massa battle down to essentially the last corners of the championship title race, when Hamilton ultimately came out on top, and the local Brazilian crowd devastated, no doubt, that their man Felipe Massa didn't get over the line. But that must have been quite interesting, because even you touch in the book about driving through the favelas and reasonably dangerous neighbourhoods around that race as well. So that entire experience between getting to Brazil and driving through those neighbourhoods, and then to have the race end and the championship end in the way it did, must have been an eye-opening experience.
Yeah, and that was actually my first one for BBC. I just wanted to go do a good job. There'd been an incident on a Thursday that we'd had a gun put in through our window. So it actually turned out quite a funny story, but I won't ruin it for people who are reading the book. But yeah, we had a gun put in through the window, and then so everybody was already in a heightened state. And it was David Coulthard's last race. So that was a big story in terms of the UK. Would Lewis Hamilton become, get his first world title? And then you just got to that Sunday where the rain was falling. Brazil always has a very different aura anyway. If you sort of believe that stadiums or places like that, you can get a different feel. That is certainly somewhere. And just how the race played out. And that to me is still one of the sort of most chilling, or a moment that sums up exactly what sport is. On paper, there was a winner and a loser, but actually there was so much more than that. It was devastation for Felipe Massa, and it was everything that Lewis Hamilton had ever dreamed of. And the fact that Felipe thought it was his family thought it was his, they'd achieved that dream, and then for it to be not taken away from him, because in actual fact, he hadn't won it. He'd never won it. But yeah, it will stay with me for the rest of my life.
As an interviewer, Lee, you'd have noticed this as well, and we get it quite often where sports people want to talk about other things, and almost their face lights up when they get to touch on topics other than their chosen sport, like Brian O'Driscoll on golf maybe is a good example. Yes. And even myself, when the couple of times I've met Ronnie O'Sullivan, regardless of talking about snooker, he loves talking about athletics and running and getting out on the on the track or on the roads. For you, there was a great anecdote in the book as well where you're talking to Lewis Hamilton, and he brings up I wouldn't say an acting debut, but he had a small, not part to play, but Ridley Scott gave him an opportunity to get on set one day.
Yeah, that was surreal. I mean, I do these end of season interviews that really, when you go in that nobody wants to be there, because maybe the guy who's won the championship wants to be there, but you sort of sit down and you're really enthusiastic, you've done all your prep and you're like, so pre-season testing, February, and they're like, February? I don't even remember last week. And you go through the year, and they're quite dull, these interviews. But Lewis just suddenly came out with the fact that in Hungary, he didn't say he lost the race because of it, but essentially he did. He'd been asked to go on to set for The Martian and sit in the chair and sort of like play the part. And when Matt Damon didn't turn up, Lewis was going to take that part for the morning and all the rest of it. And he basically burnt himself out. And he was exhausted, and he drove like he was exhausted. He doesn't make many mistakes as a driver. He created chaos in that race. And it was just a bizarre interview. And then at the end, he said to me, oh man, I shouldn't have said that to you. That should have been in my book. And I was like, I'm not sure if it should be in anyone's book, to be honest. But yeah, most drivers get up in the morning, have breakfast, get to the track, headphones on, head down. Whereas Lewis actually has the capacity, maybe not on that day, but he has a capacity for so much more. In Singapore, he took his DJ suite with him, and he's making his music at 1, 2, 3, 4 in the morning. And admittedly, we stay on European time, but most drivers only focus on the driving, whereas Lewis has always had a lot more time for other stuff.
Finally, Lee, and look for other stories from other drivers, and Sebastian Vettel is one that I really love from the book as well. Such a fascinating character, but people can listen or read to all the different stories with all those 7 drivers in the book. But if you had to put your nail in the mast and pick your best Formula One driver of all time, let's say. I know Juan Manuel Fangio from the 50s comes up in a lot of people's conversations, but even in a recent sense, do you have a favourite? I'm sure you're asked the question quite often.
Yeah, and I was actually talking about this to Sir Jackie Stewart, a 3-time world champion, who I've known since I was a kid. We were talking about this recently. Can you compare like for like in terms of, the sport has changed so much. The cars have changed even in the last 10 years. It's really difficult to know. Michael had his faults, a lot of people said. I thought he was a sublime driver. I think that actually somebody who goes without a lot of recognition is Fernando Alonso, because he's just a 2-time world champion, but for many years he's dragged these underperforming cars around tracks. He's 8 points away from being a 5-time world champion, and through whether it be decisions, moving teams at the wrong time, he could have achieved so much more. But I think actually he's an exceptional driver, Fernando.
Lee, great stuff as always. Where can people get the book? It's Black and White Publishing. Inside F1 is the name of the book, but all good bookstores, is it?
All good bookstores, apparently even supermarkets. So the next time that you've struggling to afford bread and butter and all the basics, just forget the food and go straight to the book stands.
Great stuff. Lee McKenzie, thanks a million for joining us as always.
Thank you.
F1 broadcaster, and definitely give the book a read. It's a great insight into some of the Formula One stories over the years. It's a fascinating sport.
Lewis Hamilton in The Martian seems like a pretty coming together of, like, if Shane Hannon was to design a movie.
Yeah. Lewis Hamilton or Matt Damon. I don't know who they should have picked there, but maybe he has a career in acting after he hangs up the. What do you say? Hangs up the gloves, hangs up the wheel. Doesn't hang up a car, but he's one of those characters that I think will go into different things. After his career is over. OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Here's what we've got on OTB Sports Radio for you across today. 10:30, as always, we have the happy quiz. I know.
Big news about the crappy quiz.
Right, breaking news, is it?
Big news. I can't break any news just yet,
Okay.
but there will be, and it won't be broken today, but there will be big news, developing news.
Right, on that.
On the crappy quiz.
Okay, fair enough. Stay tuned, folks. That's at 10:30 on OTB Sports Radio today. 11:30, we have the football kickoff. Ger, Cullum and Damien Delaney looking ahead to the weekend's football. From 1 p.m, it's OTB Gold with James McLean. 3 o'clock, the Roscommon Mount Rushmore, where we pick the 4 greatest sports people of all time from Roscommon. 4 o'clock, Team 33 League of Ireland legend interview with Tony Sheridan, and at 6 o'clock it's OTB Gold with Chris Waddle. Follow OTB across all our social channels and subscribe to the OTB Podcast Network for all the best in the latest sports content. Back after these ads with Alan Quinlan in studio.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
OTB Sports Rugby.
The line that comes out of it, that there needs to be more study done on it straight away, is something that sticks out an awful lot. I mean, the headline number is terrifying, and the idea of this being not taken fully seriously would be truly terrible for the sport.
Subscribe to the rugby stream on the OTB Sports app now.
OTB AM
with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
9:15, it is OTB AM, and delighted to have you with us this morning. Alan Quinlan, how are you keeping?
I'm very good, lads, and yourselves?
Flying it. You were tuned into Ronan earlier.
I was, yeah.
He's not coming back, I don't think, was the short story.
Yeah, I suppose he's deflecting on that. But
life is good.
Clear, yeah.
And like, you don't want there to be an arrogance about the question to be asked either, because, like, why would you want to leave a club like La Rochelle, who are European champions, competing in the top 14, like one of the best clubs in the world? It'd be an arrogant suggestion to think that, you know, he must come back to Ireland because that's the next stage in his career. He's doing just fine at a huge club in Europe.
Yeah, it's an added bonus for him that he's a team that are progressing. They obviously won in Europe. They've been knocking on the door for in the top 14, getting right to challenge for that league title for the last couple of seasons as well. So progressive team. He's got a few signings this year. They love him out there. So there's a lot of positives for him and why he wouldn't come back. Obviously, there's always going to be a draw at some stage. And there's always going to be speculation about, you know, any jobs that are come up with any of the provinces, vacancies with the national side. You know, you think he's probably next in line, but he's probably continuously going to be asked for the next number of years, and until the point when La Rochelle start losing games and there's a bit of dismay there, which
doesn't look likely to happen.
That doesn't happen. Yeah, I think he's done a really good job probably, and he has. There's no doubt he's done a really good job there. And you know, it's obviously we've heard lots of coaches over the years speak about the culture in France and having incredibly talented players, but maybe not the drive and desire that certain people, you know, would have been used to here with less talent, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's respectable. So I think if you get incredibly powerful athletes who are, you know, really good work ethic and they look after themselves off the pitch a lot, and they understand that, you know, if you want to challenge in Europe and if you want to challenge and win trophies, that there's an added kind of impetus around, you know, the way you look after yourself as well, that you can't just rely on that athletic ability. And I think he's probably, when he was at Racing first, that would have been a challenge at the start, and then Grant Carter comes in, and the more and more you have these conversations around that stuff, and other players see it and they start to do it. So it doesn't guarantee a success, but I think he's done a brilliant job, and you know, the scenes last year after they won the European Cup in La Rochelle for the few days afterwards were, you know, he's a hero there now, no matter what happens.
We touched on the difficulties with other ice, Quinny, earlier of a Munster man
taking the reins in some fashion at Leinster and vice versa? Like, should that be an issue? Like, I guess it's down to an individual thing, but I think Rog said I'm from Cork was his answer earlier. Is I'm from Tip? That would be your response probably if you posed the question.
Obviously, it's more difficult than a normal situation if you haven't played for so long for Munster. We've had, of course, when I played, there was a couple of players who went and played with Leinster, and that wasn't seen as being a traitor or anything, because some of these guys were, they weren't regular starters. Stephen Keogh and Trevor Hogan are two to come to mind, two great lads who weren't regular starters, so they were getting an opportunity to maybe enhance themselves more in a Leinster shirt. You had Sean Cronin, who started out when Munster, and obviously went on. Owen Redden, they went on to have brilliant success with Leinster and then in turn with Ireland. So it's a little bit different. Declan Kidney had a short spell with as coach with Leinster, and then came back to Munster and won a European Cup, and was kind of frowned upon by some people in Leinster. But
well, sure. I mean,
it'd be a big move. It'd be a big move for him to go there. But from a professional point of view, if you're looking at working with, going into an environment that's incredibly successful, and you would imagine will continue to be pretty successful given the structures they have in place and the playing numbers and the school systems, which are very strong here. From a professional point of view, it would be a pretty attractive proposition. But I heard you saying this morning that you could see him going to England ahead of Leinster, which should be...
Well,
that's another...
when we asked him about England, when you remember he was on BT last year and it all came up, and it was like, Eddie Jones was under pressure and everybody was like, oh, this guy would be a great fit. He was definitely sort of, at that point, I felt that answer was more, I might actually do that at some point.
More open.
Yeah, I think he'd probably get less stick for taking the English job, which just sounds crazy, really, doesn't it, than if he took the Leinster job. But I don't know. Like, I can see him. His family are well settled in France. There's a nice lifestyle there, good climate. You've been on holidays in La Rochelle. It's pretty nice there.
Cheese and wine as well.
Yeah.
Plenty of it over there.
So, yeah, I think it just depends. But I would never close. There was one thing I would say about Ronan, knowing him. You could rule him out of something and he could just come on next week and surprise you and take the Leinster job, you know what I mean, or something like that. So he's right. I think he's pretty determined. He backs himself in whatever decisions he makes. It was obviously very brave what he did. To head straight off after he retired, because he could have stayed here and slipped into the system here for a year or two and then went, but he just up sticks with his family and went off, and obviously going to New Zealand as well. So he backs himself when he makes these decisions. It isn't as if he goes and asks 10 friends, what should I do or shouldn't do? And it's like he's very determined, and
we're all transfixed with the idea that he needs to come home, or he'll come home at some point or other. And he obviously, everything you've ever heard him say on air is like, I'm absolutely fine. I'm ploughing my own furrow here, and life is good. And I think we should take that as it is.
I think if something came up with Ireland and again, it's speculation, I think.
And that isn't coming up anytime soon either.
I think we will at some stage see him back in Ireland, whether it be with one of the provinces or with the national side.
Couple of coaching tickets under a bit of pressure early doors, meeting tonight in Galway, and the starts have been sticky. The new nature of the league means that it's less forgiving for losing those early games than it might have been in previous years when they get further down the track. So big pressure on both sides, and a loss tonight really for either one is going to really turn up the dial for them.
Yeah, it is. There's been these games have been pretty feisty the last couple of years, and there's been a bit of niggle in it, and there's a desperation from both sides. And probably with both sides tonight, Adrian, I think there's probably a lack of cohesion and a lack of confidence in the way they're playing and the way they're executing, and that kind of feel-good factor when you go out onto a sports field and you talk about having your flow and even having good periods in a game. It was an incredibly difficult start for Connacht. To go to Belfast at any stage is tricky, even though they've had success and won up there in recent years. it doesn't give you much kind of wriggle room really when you have to go there in your first game and then you're in South Africa against the Stormers and the Bulls, more or less at full strength, shorn of a player or two here and there that were involved in the Rugby Championship with the Springboks, but a lot of strength there. And so in some ways it's a little bit false on Connacht in the sense that I've said this, most teams would struggle to go to South Africa now. You'd need to be fully locked and loaded going to South Africa, expecting to get a win and run them close. So maybe we're kind of judging Connacht falsely here a little bit. We'll know tonight. I think they will. Obviously, the challenge for them is, they've only had a couple of sessions this week because they only got back, I think, Sunday, and I'm not sure if they trained Monday or what their schedule was this week, but probably the most they could have had this week is 2 pitch sessions on the new 4G pitch. But they've a kind of amount of work done in the last few weeks that they can rely on. They had a player meeting before they departed South Africa, trying to address some of the issues. So you've got to keep fighting. It's very early doors for both sides, and both of them have issues. Connacht are giving away a lot of penalties. They're the most penalised team in the competition so far. Munster aren't far behind. I think 41 penalties, Connacht. Munster 38 or something. So that tells you that you're porous, you're panicking, you're not able to deal with pressure. Because, obviously under pressure you make those decisions to, be offside or not have your discipline spot on, or losing ball at breakdown. I think Munster have had a lot of turnovers at the breakdown. They're not easy fixes, they take some time. So Connacht, look, they'll be chomping at the bit to try and get a win tonight. And for either side, if they get some sort of I think for Munster going away to Galway, if they were to get a result, I don't think they even need the best performance. If they get a result, I think that will give them a lot of.
Yeah, I think whoever ends up on the winning side tonight, suddenly it's as is the nature of these things, everything's grand and the other team are not. What?
It's results based, isn't it? Tonight, really, not performance based. No,
exactly. But speaking of performance, I'm forgetting about some of the stuff that you've mentioned there in terms of like the errors count and the issues that are documented now. We're 3 games in, so it's probably not a bad chance to take a bit of a sense check as to your view of what the new coaching ticket, what style they're trying to play, or what, once this starts coming together, what's going to be the personality of this Munster team in terms of the style of play.
No, I think they're definitely trying to be a little bit more expansive and keep the ball alive a little bit more. Munster Connacht do that more naturally, don't they? Because they've been doing it for a number of years, and they're a very exciting side to watch. And I think that's the biggest concern. They've conceded 15 tries. They've only scored 5 in the first 3. That's kind of un-Connacht-like. They usually get 3 or 4 tries a game. Even if they lose a game, it's a high-scoring game. So they're definitely much more comfortable with their lines of running and their support play and the pace. The issues Connacht have is probably having that bit of ferocity up front and that physical power at times, which just seems to be a stumbling block that's holding them back, and it's difficult. In an ideal world, you want a big strong pack and then loads of power there. They've lots of good players, I'm not saying that, but just underpowered a little bit from a physical point of view. But for Munster, I think trying to move the ball more sounds simple, and it frustrates me having to watching the last couple of games, because I don't know, my mindset when I played was probably a little bit too loose around 20-yard passes and offloads and stuff like that, and at times I had to reel myself in, and I would have got into trouble with coaches in my time, particularly with Ireland, trying to be move the ball from the ball is kicked off and you're in your own 22, and I'm trying to figure out how do you run past guys and pass here and keep it alive. The game has changed because you make mistakes in your own half too much and people kick goals and the pressure, the breakdown and all that. Munster have got to get that balance right, and I think that's what Mike Prendergast and Dennis Leamy and Andy Kiriakou and Graham Rowntree, of course, as a group of coaches, they'll be trying to get a little bit more tempo in Munster's game, utilise a little bit of width, keeping the ball alive. And I always think back, I played in Munster teams that were very direct, and Rog would have kicked a lot. and we mauled a lot, and we had one-out runners a lot, and it was intense. It was exciting. It was there was tempo to it because it was all done at pace, and it was done with real ferocity at the breakdown, and teams couldn't slow us down or stop us, even if they had the defensive line, because we were very aggressive and direct. So, I think you still have to have a bit of the old school approach where you have to kick a lot. The modern game dictates that. You're coming up against technically, very good people across the board on the breakdown. But I think what kind of concerned me a lot in the last couple of weeks was some of the catch-pass stuff, which you would think would be better, but if you're not doing that stuff for long periods of time, and it's not just the first, it's not really first and second phase or third phase or fourth phase. It's when you get into multi-phase, that's where Munster lose their shape a lot, and that's the biggest challenge. And that's what Mike Prendergast will be trying to do, is when you get into the multi-phase stuff. What's your body shape like? Are you square to the what way are your hips? Are you running across the field? Are you fixing a defender? Are you running a line that's going to hold a defender? All that kind of stuff. So they've got to get better at that, and I think it will take time. So the word patience has been mentioned a fair bit, and this is just a reality. I think Munster need to, the players themselves need to take a little bit more control around their desire and their aggression. And I said this in the podcast during the week. Peter O'Mahony was the one that was showing the fight. He was the one that was being confrontational.
Literally, yeah.
But that's the quickest solution here. If you have mistakes and you're lacking confidence and you're dropping balls and your lines of running and things are not correct, the quickest solution to try and get some flow and momentum is not about, I'm not saying, because there's obviously a lot spoke about the physicality of the game during the week and dementia and links to motor neurons, disease, all this kind of stuff. I'm not saying go out and start bashing people, but I'm saying the quickest solution is to try and win those physical contests, which is within your control. And I think that's what Munster have to do tonight. They need to go to Galway and try and impose themselves a little bit, be confrontational, go toe-to-toe a little bit, and then obviously not overcomplicate what they're trying to do there, because if they think they can go there and just throw the ball around and this ball's going to be thrown on the ground again and that's going to suit, it's going to take some time, the attack game, and people need to realise that, because you're changing behaviours that have been implemented, or not implemented, I should say, over the last number of years.
Because that was a shortcoming on behalf of the coaches that were there at that time, or because it wasn't part of the game plan and now they've changed things, so it dictates
There's a mixture here of accountability from the players and some of them showing us, I'm not saying that they're not good enough, but showing us examples where it's indicating that they're not good enough. They've got to play better than that. They've got to be more forthright in their own assessment of their performances. They've got to put their hands up, and they've got to do it. There's no point in going into videos and nodding at the attack coach or defence coach. Like, if you're missing tackles in a game and the defence coach is showing you a system where you should be, and you get to the place where he wants you to be, and you missed a one-on-one tackle, well, you've got to take accountability. So it's the same in attack. If you're getting into good shape and you're dropping the ball, well, there's not a lot the coach can do at that particular moment if you're not getting into the position or if you're not holding someone in defence. So the players have got to take responsibility here. And the reality is, I think, they've 10 away with the emerging Ireland side, and some really young, exciting players. And you see the Ronan Quinlan, I think Patrick Campbell is a great prospect, a Dogbo. Fionn Gibbons is on the bench tonight. He did really well with the 20. So there will come a point, Adrian, where people will say, well, just play the young players. If we're going to lose anyway, let's play the young players. At least in 12 months' time, they'll have gained the experience. So it's a kind of a critical period and moment for some of the more senior players that they've got to... And that kind of really enhances tonight, doesn't it?
I can't wait for it. And
because you think Connacht have Leinster coming next week.
Yeah.
So imagine if they lost tonight and then Leinster coming to Galway next week.
Well, they're in the habit of beating them down there particularly, but...
potentially it could be 5 from 0 from 5. And Munster have, they lose tonight. That's 0 from 4. Well, they've 1 from 4. They've got the Bulls coming. They've got to go to the Aviva, and then they've got Ulster. So, usually this time of year you get a few fixtures that you pick up a few results, and you might lose 1 or 2, but you've won 3 or 4 out of the first block. Both these sides are in real danger of putting themselves in a position of forget playoffs, not even making Europe. So it's unfair pressure so early. Connacht's their away fixtures are down to the 4G pitch and stuff like that. But look, it's a very hard game to call. If you ask me who's going to win tonight, it's difficult. I like the Munster pack in a sense that, with Byrne and Klein.
It's probably the first pick back row as well.
Gavin Coombs coming back as well.
That's the first pick back row, is it?
Yeah, it is, I think. But, they're still down numbers. Chris Farley's not there. Zebo's not there. Haley's injured. Anton Frisch is away, who looked very good during the week against the Pumas. So it'll be really interesting to see Hawkshaw playing at 12 tonight for Connacht. He's a very good footballer. Jack Carty, obviously, back for Connacht is a big boost for them.
Boost. It sounds like everything you've said so far is leading to Connacht are going to win it.
Well, they'll believe they can win it, I think, and that helps. I played against Connacht many times in my career, and I always felt that they never believed they could beat us. It was a case of, but that's changed. The culture has changed there, and they've players who really believe they can. And Munster, even though they're not the Munster of old, are still a big scalp for everyone. We saw the reaction in the Dragons a few weeks. So you can imagine if Connacht get the results, which they did last January, which was a big kind of talking point in Munster's season, and Johan van Gran's reign, where Munster passed the ball 45 times in the game. They were beaten 10-8. They should have been beaten by a lot more. You can imagine if Connacht, the crowd are going to be buzzing for that tonight. So there's a lot to play for both sides. Munster can kind of kickstart their season, and Connacht can obviously as well.
Yeah. Can I just briefly ask you, Quinny, just on the spectacle itself before we wrap up? Manny Friend pointed this out during the week, talking about the water breaks, and I think one of Munster's halves against Zebre last week, there was actually 55
or 66 minutes, first half.
I'm not saying it's an identity crisis for rugby, but this is an interest levels thing where people are just going to drop off and not watch games because they're going on for far too long. Will it get to a crisis point where we need to actually look at, well, the water breaks is one simple fix, but there's a deeper thing here where
water breaks need to go. There's enough of stoppages to throw in a water bottle here and there and there's going to be an injury or two per half where somebody's down for a minute, that the guys who run in with messages. These water breaks have to go, I think. Although sometimes if I was out in the field, you'd feel like you'd love about 5 minutes to gulp it down. The TMO stuff is, again, it's really poor. Niall Scannell's try last week wasn't a try for me. They gave over 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes, looking over and back. When the viewers or the people looking at the screen at the stadium could see.
You can't really do the football thing of let the play continue and then come back to it, can you? Because it's attritional and it doesn't feel
for a try-scoring thing there, you have to, I think, with the foul play and potential foul play and stuff, obviously the play goes on and a TMO check comes in.
But it shouldn't be going back 7 or 8 phases to look for forward passes.
It is an issue, and I agree with Andy Friend in a point that Connacht are a team that really want to play with flow and tempo because that's their game. They want to keep going and wear teams down and get into multi-phase and get into 10, 12, 15 phases because they have that ambition, and he's programmed them to play like that. I think the day that we see Munster kind of getting to that level would be great, but there's a lot of work. It takes time. It takes a lot of time, and who knows, Munster might surprise people tonight and really get a really good performance. Who knows? I think they need one. And there's a fair bit of pressure there for both sides. Obviously we spoke about, so it should be a cracker.
Yeah, really looking forward to it. That game is 7:35 tonight, obviously in Galway. You can watch it on TG Car. And then you have Leinster against the Sharks tomorrow at 5:05, and you have Ulster at home against the Ospreys in Belfast later on that evening as well. So that's your rugby for the weekend. Look forward to catching up with you next week, Quinny. Thanks a million.
Cheers, thanks.
Fair play. It is 9:37. That is pretty much it from OTB AM this morning. Shane, good luck this evening.
Cheers, Adrian. I'll be
quite know what you're doing down there yet, but
he's a Connacht fan as well. I forgot to put him up on
yeah. I mean, you give me
fellow Tommy from
grief.
Tommy Bow country, and he's a Connacht fan.
I'm a Tommy Bow fan and a Connacht fan. Yeah,
can't be both.
I'm not alone. We had a Calvin commenter coming in this morning backing me up, so
that is definitely a conversation we'll be coming back to again down the track. Thanks a million for joining us over the course of the morning, and good luck to you this evening, Shane, and enjoy your weekend. I'm sure Saturday's OTB is going to be an absolute belter.
Going to be fun. Tune into the news around 1 o'clock tomorrow.
Right, that is almost it from us for today. We're brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. We're back on Monday morning. It'll be Jared Nathan, Andy Mitten will be in hand as well to react to United's oddly timed Sunday night encounter at Everton. Alan himself, you'll be back with us to review the weekend's URC action, and Nathan will be along to deliver his, as ever, faultless, brilliant, no doubt, Gillette Labs performance rankings and much more as well besides. And by the way, we had a few commenters in earlier on asking about the Krabby quiz. It will be, I believe, he says, with a deep sigh, coming your way in about an hour's time or thereabouts. So 10:30 a.m. Stay tuned for that. It'll be absolute cracker. Absolutely, no doubt about it. Right now, John Giles with Nathan, last night's show. Enjoy and have a good weekend.
It is Thursday on Off the Ball, so it's time to talk to John Giles. Evening, John.
Evening, Nathan.
The last two games I were at was the Manchester derby last Sunday, and before that, Ireland-Armenia. And I won't lie, John, it was like watching two different sports.
It certainly was.
How impressed were you with that Manchester City performance in the derby?
Well, the Manchester City performance was fantastic. I think they went 3 up, 4 up by half time. You can't wish for much more. Two lads getting Foden and Haaland getting hat tricks. Just played them off the pitch. Played United off the pitch. Nathan, no contest.
They obviously have an incredibly talented squad, a far more talented squad than Manchester United. But what was so obvious there on the day was the work rate as well, the intensity from Manchester City from the first minute, from Jack Grealish when he had that run on Diogo Dalot and he picked up the booking. To put it back to basic, they also seem to want it that bit more, which is a sign for Manchester City that they're going to be almost impossible to stop this season.
Well, they're going to be very difficult to stop, Nathan, but they'll have teams against them that will put much more spirit into the game than United did. United were disgraceful on the day. Now, you're talking about City, which is great. I mean, the way they played is the way you should play. Plenty of goal from the goal. Plenty of goal, plenty of getting tight on the opposition, and obviously scoring the goals the way they did. There's 4 up at half time, which is excellent. So they're a perfect example to United of what needs to be done. Now, I'm not saying United can do that overnight, but what was amazing afterwards when manager Erik ten Hag, United were humiliated, was thanking Pep Guardiola in the press for the lessons that they gave them.
A reality check.
Well, I've never heard of that before. I've never heard of an opposing manager who'd been totally trounced, especially in the same city, publicly stating, "Thanks very much for the lesson." This is total rubbish, Nathan. From a manager coming out like that. He said he didn't put Ronaldo on the sub out of respect for him. This is schoolboy stuff. And then we'll read afterwards, Fernandes is in the dressing room after the match shouting his mouth off. That's the manager's job. And the thing with Fernandes, and I've seen it before in football, the guy doing this more shouting off, Nathan, is the guy who's not really doing his job. But he shouldn't be allowed to do that. The manager's obviously in the dressing room and say, "Look, you keep quiet. I'll do the talking here." But from United's point of view, it was rubbish. From a Manchester City point of view, it was excellent.
Just on City then, before we get on to all those points on Erik ten Hag and some of the strange things that were said after the game, you could almost spend time talking about each of that front five for Manchester City and how important and how brilliant they were during that game. Like Jack Grealish is a player we've spoken about a lot over the last few weeks and some of the struggles he's had. Everything, all the question marks that were over him and the way he was playing and being conservative and not going at the defence, did he answer a lot of those questions with that performance last Sunday?
Well, it was better than he has been playing, Nathan. And it was an ideal match for him to be in, because they were brilliant from the start. And obviously, if your teammates are doing that, then it makes it easier for you. So Grealish played well. But I mean, the real heroes there was Haaland, as we know, scored 3, and Foden scored. I mean, Foden is a really top-class player. But Grealish did better than he has been doing in previous matches. But you would expect him to, on a night like that or a day like that, when you're playing against the opposition that Manchester City were playing against.
Foden, because of the team that he's in, and there's so many superstars, I don't say he's underappreciated, but so often we focus on Kevin De Bruyne last season, and this season all anyone wants to talk about is Erling Haaland. And even after the game on Sunday, it's all Erling Haaland because it's 3 home hat-tricks in a row, overshadowing the fact that Foden, yet again, in one of the biggest games of the season, has turned up and delivered for his side. And he's also only 22. When you look at Foden and his skill set, what are you seeing that makes him special?
Well, nearly everything, Nathan. His control is good. His attitude is good. He's quick, takes his chances. As you say, he's only 22. He's only still learning his trade. And he's playing in different positions. I mean, Haaland is brilliant, but Haaland plays in the position that he's best in. Foden, to be honest, I wouldn't be able to tell you what is his best position, because he's so good. He plays on the right side, plays on the left side. He can play down the middle. He can play in midfield. You know, he's a terrific lad. His attitude is good. So he's got everything going for him. And I think he has the right attitude to get better and better, Nathan. You know, you say De Bruyne. I'm sometimes not a De Bruyne fan, but I think since he's got Haaland into the team and Bowden, the passes that he has at his disposal, that he's able to do, is being used more and more now, and there's somebody there to deliver his passes to, which is a huge help for him as well. And he's well able to do that, as we know, De Bruyne. Like, he can pick a pass out, he can deliver the pass. So it's a huge combination for them. You know, you got Silva in the middle of the field as well. I think he's the best midfield player by far. So they're setting up the chances. You've got Haaland now that they didn't have last year, or a real goal scorer, and now they got him. So that's a plus as well, Nathan. So it can only get better and better for City. I can't see their attitude diminishing in any way, and you got the right manager there for them. So, like, the performance last week was excellent from City, but you'd have to say United's performance generally, even fighting for it, wasn't there from the start of the game. Not from the start, even.
Haaland has 14 goals now in his 8 Premier League appearances, 19 in 12 games in total, with a couple of goals he got in the first half last night. Like, we have never seen anything like this, certainly since the Premier League started. We're almost going back towards Dixie Dean times for a goal scoring record like that. If he can maintain it, it'll be an unbelievable number he gets to. When you watch him, can you figure out just why he's so good?
Well, his attitude is good for the start. And don't forget, before he came to City, he scored loads of goals in Germany, wasn't it?
Yeah, Borussia Dortmund.
You know, his record there was unbelievable. And now he's in a situation where he's got a lot of really, really good players around him that are making the chances for him. Because if you look at him playing, he doesn't make many chances for other people, Nathan. No, that's not a criticism. It's because he's concentrating on getting goals himself. Like, in general play, he's not in it that much. But when it comes to the real stuff for him, he's in it, because he's so quick and so well balanced for a big fella. There's not many big fellas like him are as well balanced and as quick. He's good in the air, as we can see. Good on both feet. Very, very quick, reads it well, he's always in there. And City do make chances, probably more chances than any other team. That's what was remarkable about City last year, that they actually scored more goals than Liverpool without a recognised striker. So it's really, really good for him. I think they're made for each other, because he's not going to kill himself working. He doesn't have to do that. But every chance he gets, well, 90% of what I've seen chances, he's sticking in the back of the net. Headers, right foot, left foot. I mean, he's been a great signing for Manchester City. There's no doubt about that.
They're not top of the league. Arsenal are top of the league. But do you see anyway City don't win the title this season?
Well, they've got to be favourites, Nathan. You know, I can't see Arsenal. Arsenal have done very well. Arteta has done very well. But I can't see him having the consistency over the long period of season that Manchester City are more likely to have. I think Manchester City have more game winners, scorers than Arsenal have.
You mentioned Eric Ten Hag and some of his comments after the game. The one that got the most attention was his reasoning for not bringing Cristiano Ronaldo on out of respect for the great career that he'd had, and almost it'd be insulting to bring him on in such a scenario. The other one was about the reality check. So among his comments were, it was a reality check, so we have to learn from it and carry on. So thank you for the lesson from Pep and City. We will take that, and we have to understand we have to do things much better. Now, that implies, obviously, it's the players who have to have that reality check. It felt to me that it was more Ten Hag who needed the reality check, because if anyone was getting carried away, when you look at that team selection, maybe it was him. They'd won 4 games in a row. There was obviously a bit of momentum, a bit of confidence. But to go into a game away at Manchester City, to leave somebody of the experience of Casemiro on the bench, to trust that Eriksen and McTominay in midfield would somehow be able to withstand that Manchester City midfield, it seemed incredibly naive.
Well, it was, yeah. What was he saying you needed, Nathan?
Who, Ten Hag?
Yeah. The players, the attitude or something. You know, like, attitude is what every professional footballer has to have from the start of the game. That's your starting point. That's not something you're looking for. That's something that should be there every time you go on the pitch. You're a professional footballer. That's what you have to do. You know, you don't have the attitude. You know, it's all the great players are great players because they have the attitude. But what attitude do you need? When you're a professional, you try the best you possibly can when the opposition have the ball, and use it as best you possibly can when you have the ball yourself. I mean, Manchester City didn't even start the game. You know, they were 4-0 up in no time because their attitude, not their attitude, but their fighting spirit, which is all part of the attitude when you go on a football pitch, Nathan. As a manager, you don't be looking for that. That should be there. And it wasn't there. So I don't know what he's talking about. It just didn't make sense at all to me about the Ronaldo situation, the attitude and all the various things that he was talking. I don't know what he's talking about. This is a local derby match in Manchester, one of the two biggest clubs in the world, where you're looking for attitude after the match. The managers set the attitude anyway, but you shouldn't be asking for attitude. You know, it's there. It should be there. And if it's not there, it should be out. You know, but he's the manager. He's responsible for that.
He ended up having to take off Malacia, the left back, at half-time because he'd been booked after Dalot had been booked. Is that just players not understanding about what sort of attitude you need in a derby? Because I guess they're throwing themselves into challenges. It's you know, all in, and some may see that as an attitude that you bring to a game, that there's a bit of fight there. They're not going to make it easy for Manchester City. They're going to get very physical with them. Obviously it didn't work.
No, and it doesn't work, Nathan. And they've been doing that for the last few matches along with Martinez. Right? I talked to somebody before the match and I said, and I don't gamble, I said, put a few bob on Martinez giving a penalty away, or any of them. Like, that's not that match that they've been doing that. They've been steaming in from nowhere. The three of them at the back there. You know, how they don't give more penalties away or penalties away, I do not know. And they're not getting the ball. You know, they're being hard or over hard for the sake of it in many ways. You know, they're not winning the ball. You've got to do things and as fullbacks and that you've got to be really careful about. And I'm not surprised he took them off. I don't think they've been playing well the last few minutes, despite the match that they've been winning. Now, I'm having a hard go at them at this way, but I just could not see any sense on anything the manager did with his players and the players at the weekend. I mean, 4-0 down at half-time in a derby match, Nathan. Dreadful stuff. And then the manager making the comments that he did about writing to them, getting in touch with Pep or something, all this rubbish. Dreadful stuff. Really, this is a big game. This is the Manchester derby. And 4-0 down at half-time. I mean, they got down to 6-3 in the end, but it was a walk in the park for City. City had the right attitude to go and play and get the ball back when you have it and use it well. That's just the basic parts of the game. And we didn't see that. And then stupid comments afterwards would drive you mad.
What would you do with somebody like Bruno Fernandes, who it seems has all the talent in the world and has been one of the outstanding players in the Premier League at times over the past couple of seasons, but you notice him more on the pitch now for his constant moaning and rolling around than actual impact with the football at his feet. It does seem when you talk about attitude that is he offering enough to United at the moment?
No, nowhere near, Nathan. Hasn't done for a long time. At least all last year. He was the one moaning at the referee, moaning at the players. He was the one you could hear, this is what we should be doing, what you should be doing. I've seen things like that before, Nathan, in clubs, where the fellow that's doing the most talking is the guy most responsible for what's happening. And the manager has to be weak there in the dressing room afterwards to let him do the shouting. What we read in the paper, you could hear him shouting from outside the dressing room. That's a player who hasn't been doing it himself. That's getting away with murder. He should be told off, shut up, sit down, you're as bad as everybody else. That's what he should be told. And it's a bad sign from the manager's point of view, to be quite honest, Nathan,
You think as well that the other players can see that like if Fernandes is going out and he's running the show in games and everyone else isn't performing, fair enough, you let him away with it. But
and they know he's not doing his stuff as well. But if the manager doesn't say straight away, be quiet, sit down, you're as bad as everybody else, I'll do the talking here, then the rest of the players know, the manager knows what he's talking about, or getting a grip of it. But if he doesn't do that, and he lets this goes through the dressing room, Nathan. This is one of the worst things you can do in football, is that one of the players in a match that they all have done badly is now taken over in the dressing room to do the shouting. You can't do it.
I want to ask you about Trent Alexander-Arnold, who scored a wonderful free kick for Liverpool against Rangers the other night, and the criticism he's been coming in for about his defensive capabilities. Jurgen Klopp was asked about this, I think mainly in the context of England and the fact that he hasn't been getting a run for England. He said he's a good defender. He doesn't always defend good. That's true as well, but this is what we're working on. He's a young player. There's space for improvement, definitely, and went on then to talk about his role in the team, how at Liverpool he asks him to press very high up the pitch and he puts the trust in Fabinho or Henderson or the three other defenders to cover him, because they really see Alexander-Arnold more as an attacking option than somebody who has massive defensive responsibilities. Is that something you hear and go, actually, yeah, that's fair enough, that explains a lot about the way that Alexander-Arnold has been playing?
I think it's total nonsense, Nathan, to be quite honest. You mean when he was asked last week about his defending, he said, I don't know what all the fuss is about Alexander's defending. As if it's okay. It's okay what he's doing. Now, Alexander is a terrific player, very talented lad, especially when he's going forward, Nathan. But he's not a good defender at all. I mean, we've been going on about him for the last 2 years. He's on the ball, distributing the ball well, brilliantly at times, making goals, but coming to defending is not poor. How he doesn't see that, Klopp, I don't know. I mean, the other night we saw him scoring a terrific free kick, and most of the papers